Had a little listen to his podcast, huh?
Dude, it's educational. And besides, I've been wanting to listen to this one.
Welcome to Idling in the Impala, a podcast by and for lovers of supernatural and the fanfiction it inspires. I'm Casey.
I'm Sandra, and today we're talking with someone who has gone all in to explore the results of when fanfiction and collaboration collide in an online community. We're discussing the fandom ecosystem and collective cognition with Nicole. Nicole has recently completed research that studied a fanfic-centric supernatural Discord server and its members. No, not idlings, but Nicole's dissertation brings to light many topics we touch upon often in this podcast, and we were eager to discuss her findings. Because really, if there isn't group griping and despair about the writing process, is it even fanfic? So, big thanks for joining us, and welcome to the podcast, Nicole.
Welcome!
Hello, hello. Oh, so fun to be here. I'm very excited.
Oh, I am so glad you were able to make it. I wanted to give a little bit of a backstory, too, about this. So I was one of the people that was interviewed for your research, and I just loved having the conversation with you. And I thought, you've done a ton of interviews. Now you get to be interviewed about the whole process and your experience with fan fiction. So I thought this was a nice little circle moment for your research. And really, thank you for taking the time, because I know we touched base a couple of times. I was like, whenever it's done, let me know. I'd love to read it and have a discussion. So thank you again for coming on.
100%.
Oh, it's definitely going to be useful for me as well, because like you said, I finished this, I turned in my dissertation, and I am excited to treat this like a little capstone for me, to help me feel a little bit more finished with it and to reflect on things that I've learned in a way that is not just getting stuck in the theories and, trapped in all the academics of it, but to actually try to talk about, the useful things that I can share with people that came out of this. So this is going to be a fun opportunity for me too.
Good. I'm glad.
Awesome.
I'm glad. I didn't know if you wanted to start, if there's anything in particular you wanted to tell listeners about yourself before we get into a couple other questions.
Yeah, I think I'm going to use this opportunity to say a little bit about who I am and what perspective I'm coming into this with. So like I mentioned, I just finished my dissertation, and it was in anthropology, which is a discipline that studies human culture. And I feel like I can now call myself an anthropologist, but I've had my little grad school experience.
Yay! Awesome. Yay!
So my name is Nicole. I'm an anthropologist. I'm applying for PhDs now, and so my journey's not over. But I did this project as my master's dissertation, really came at it from a love of fandom. So I'm both a fan and a scholar. In fan studies, you call that an ACA-fan, which is a fun word to say as well.
Okay. How do you spell that?
Yeah, write that down.
ACAFAN. It's literally just ACA fan.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my little bit about myself before we get into it.
All right.
So sorry, Sandra. I'm gonna jump the gun.
Go ahead.
If you've sort of got your eye on your PhD and things like that, do you know kind of what you would want to be researching for that? Have you got any thoughts or ideas, or are you just taking a minute?
I am going to be continuing in the vein that my master's was in. So I did research on this Discord server and in fandom space. So I'm going to continue those two things, basically. I'm really interested in not only how people write fan fiction, but also how they relate to the characters, how they relate to their own writing, how they relate to the community around them. And so I'm definitely going to continue this track of online fandom-y, fanfiction-y kind of questions.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Amazing.
It's always nice to be able to, I think when you get the opportunity to research and learn more about what you love, it just makes it easier. There's something that really interests you, just I want to learn more. Please tell me all the things. And I want to dive really deep into that research. Good for you. Good for you. I'm glad that you're going to.
Thank you.
But yeah, definitely give yourself some time to just be proud of the accomplishment and the milestone you've achieved.
Yeah.
Yes.
100%. I'm gonna have to sit on my whole hands for this whole interview, Sandra, because I have so many questions.
No, it's okay.
God.
We'll just go through a couple different things to start, and then we'll just see where it goes. It's with this is good. This is good. I wanted to start with your personal experience with fandom and or fan fiction, because I really don't know a lot about your place in all of that? Because you said you're interested and you've had that, I'm assuming, part in your life, but what is that about? Like, what is fandom? How much fan fiction, like, have you yourself, I guess, written or been a part of?
I read voraciously. So I've been in and around fandom spaces for a good part of my life, I would say, very privately, and I never really interacted with other fans much. I read so much fan fiction, though, and it was something that really was a real hobby for me. I read on fanfiction.net. I moved on to AO3. But in terms of writing fan fiction, I haven't since I was like in middle school. I'm sure a lot of middle schoolers have that kind of writing, a lot of really dramatic or self-indulgent stuff. And then I never finished anything. So I recently joined a Discord server in the It fandom by Stephen King. Because that's, I watched the movie recently. I was trying to actually meet people for the first time. And the experience of being in that fandom Discord server just was so interesting to me. There was so much cool stuff going on. And I was like, someone needs to write about this. It's so exciting. People are so collaborative. This needs to be a research project. And so that was the catalyst for my topic and my project.
Now, you said that you were sort of so would you have considered yourself a lurker at some point?
I think, yeah, that's a good word for it.
Okay.
Because I didn't know anyone and I didn't really make any like friends or connections, but I was reading what people were posting and I was reading fan fiction and liking fan art. So I was like the serial liker.
I can relate to that. It's funny. I mean, we have our own Discord server and I don't post that much. Like I'll post like information about what's going on with the podcast, like server news. I try to, put in a comment here or there, but I don't know. I mean, that could be a whole big unpacking about me as a person, but I also know I'm very introverted. And I think that unfortunately, even in an online space, it takes a lot for me to get past it. I'm better at it, definitely, but it was a thing, to like even like join a server. And then even at that point, it's like, I didn't do much, it was just like, I was just kind of there. And then that was it. Casey?
It's kind of intimidating, yeah.
Yeah, Casey, what would you say?
I'm just the only person I know that set up her own Discord and then was like, no, I lurk. You're the only person I know that lurks in their own server. I didn't engage with fandom until like we started doing this, really. Like I met some friends through writing and posting. One of those friends put me in touch with Sandra and the rest is history there. But I didn't really, until we started doing the podcast and it was kind of like a reaching out and trying to like, find a place in the community, find people who would be interested, reach an audience. I was very much like you, Nicole. I was like, I'll like everything and I'll read voraciously and I'm happy to just be in my little space. And now I'm in all the spaces. Cassandra lurks. Wherever she goes, she's like, I'm here, I'm not talking. And I'm like, well, one of us has to. Fuck. All right, fine. I guess I do that. And actually,
reaching out is a good one. Yeah, I like how you said reaching out because that's how it feels. It's like it takes effort to actually try to be social with people.
Yeah, for some people, I think for some people, it's just it's a lot of energy for me. I think too, and I know some people kind of need that energy, and so they are in search of it. But then other people, I think you're expending a lot of energy to try to make connections. So I just find people just in general, just how they all interact fascinating. So that's, it's great that you get, you're like, I need to really like look at this more, I'm interested, but so it feels like this gave you sort of like, hey, I have to do this thing. Can I do this thing? Sort of a situation.
Yeah. It was like, well, no one else is writing about this. I guess it has to be me, but it's like the excitement is what drives it. And I think there's a really actually interesting connection between lurking and the the methods of anthropology.
Mm.
And where you want to observe a lot. You want to have your eyes open. You want to take a lot of stuff in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of noticed this when doing my project. There's quite a lot of behavioral similarities between lurking in a fandom and being a researcher in a fandom.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is too then about me. Like I love learning about, how people's own, like their journeys in it. But it's like, I want to search that out and ask those questions, and then just hear the stories that they, that they have to tell us. Cause I think it's all, we've talked about this more. We really want to try to make this podcast. I think when we do interviews with people in the fandom, it's kind of providing a little time capsule for this time in fandom and supernatural fandom in particular. And then also looking back at people who've, been a part of the fandom at different points. We call them the old guard and, some people that are relatively new and just, the impacts they've had or the impacts they've felt in fandom. I think that's just, it's a topic that I think someone will be interested in, coming back to and hearing, people's stories with.
Oh, yes.
This. So I think that's great. I know you've used the term in your paper, and tell me if I'm saying ethnography. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
What does that mean?
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, it's kind of a technical term that is used in a lot of social science research. The way that people talk about how they do research is called methodology. It's what methods you use to study a community.
Okay.
And when you're studying people, oh my gosh, there's so many options for how to go about it. You can try to do it really numerically. You can try to use different tools and bots and scrapers and all this stuff. But what anthropology likes to do is called ethnography, which is, I like to call it the method of radically hanging out with people, which means that the primary means that you try to find out about a community is just by actually spending time with them, not in a lab, not doing surveys and questionnaires, but just getting to know them, seeing how they interact in their daily lives, following them around, watching them do stuff, maybe taking part in it yourself. This is called like participant observation. You're both a participant in, let's say, like a dance. You have to participate to learn all the steps, but then you're also an observer because you're watching how everyone else interacts and how they teach and how they move around the space. So participant observation is one of the primary things that makes ethnography.
Okay. Are there any examples of that, like a layperson would know, like, or would have heard of, like, in terms of like a big study or something that's come out that would kind of give us a little bit of context to that too, that you can think of?
I'm going to do my best here. Yes, because unfortunately, anthropology, I think, is in a little bit of a invisible spot. Like a lot of people know sociologists, a lot of people know psychologists, but anthropology is a little bit more hidden. So I'm going to list out a couple of the big ones and see if it rings any bells for people.
Okay.
If anyone knows the author Zora Neale Hurston, she wrote Their Eyes Were Watching God. I know I read that book in like a high school English class. She is actually a trained anthropologist. She trained under the most famous anthropologist in America, Franz Boas, and she wrote a bunch of ethnographies trying to preserve bits of Southern African American culture and dialect. So she has a lot of really beautiful works that are her telling the stories that she was told, all the folk tales, all of the little quirks of the language and daily life of the people who, in just the previous generation, were slaves. So she has some really gorgeous work there. So that might be familiar for people. The book Righteous Dope Fiend by Philippe Bourgeois, I think is how you say the French there.
Okay.
That was a book that got a little bit of press because it was like right before the opioid epidemic got really famous in the US, and he did a lot of following around of opioid addicts and homeless people to see how tough their lives were. And so that got some press as well, if any of your listeners know about that.
Okay.
And let's see, I'm not going to list too many more because
Yeah.
this is probably not super exciting for people.
No, but
the
it's
big one,
yeah.
the big one that's about like online or digital culture
Mhm.
is this guy named Tom Belstorff did a virtual ethnography where he just spent a lot of time in the video game Second Life,
Mm.
which is where you have like avatars that you can make look like anything, and you just do kind of normal daily life in a video game.
Mhm.
And so he was just a regular member there for several years, actually, and wrote a really famous book called Coming of Age in Second Life,
Hmm.
which was experimenting with what if we only do anthropology in an online community? Because traditionally it's all like you go to a village and you meet
Right.
everyone, or
Yeah.
you go to a workplace and you sit in a cubicle to see how it works. So he was a really big inspiration for me because he said, what if we do this anthropology thing online?
Mhm.
Which is what I did.
No, it's great. I'm actually really interested because I remember Second Life way back. So that would be interesting, I think, to read about too.
It's definitely a good one, yeah.
Yeah. I was also thinking, because I know that one of the reasons too I wanted to get to chat with you is, and I'm sure this does not fall in terms of field of study, it's probably more sociology, but and I can't remember it right now, but we had a discussion. It was a paper that was done about fandom platforms. So things like fanfiction.net and like why people were kind of migrating from one fanfic site to another and what the factors were involved, like whether they were outside external factors or internal factors. And I found that a very fascinating, part of how people sort of just like nomadic, like, you pick up your stuff and you move from one thing to another based off of what your needs are or what you're not getting, from a certain space. So this kind of felt like a nice offshoot of that discussion too, because it had a lot about online communities. And I don't think Discord was like one of the main topics because again, it was just mainly fanfic focused, but they talked about LiveJournal, they talked about fanfiction.net, and then they talked about AO3. And I just remember seeing a video from the person that put the paper together and I was just like, oh, this is interesting. So yeah, this makes a lot of sense too, in terms of like the reasonings about why you were interested in doing it. But you also, so you observed and you were a participant in a Discord server that focused primarily on supernatural fan fiction. Why is that? Was that just the only one you could find for fan fiction? Or what happened?
The biggest one?
There's a lot of reasons that went into it. I did reach out to, oh gosh, probably like 5 to 7 different Discord servers to see who would let me in. Because it's kind of a weird request, isn't it? You're like, hi, can I just sit in
I
your
want to
server
study.
and watch you? It's kind of an interesting ask. And so I reached out to a bunch. But to be honest, so let's call the server the Lagoon. The Lagoon was my top choice. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is Supernatural is a very big, very famous fandom. Even people who aren't really in fandom spaces, I say, oh, I did a research paper about Supernatural. They go, oh, yeah, I've heard of that, which is, I think, useful when you're trying to get people to care about a topic that you're researching.
Yeah.
And 2, because I have been lurking for several years, I already knew about the Lagoon. I had seen some Tumblr posts go by that talked about, what events they were putting on. And so I already had it on my radar. Maybe it wasn't the most like objective choice, but I was like, oh, that might be perfect. That might be the perfect place. So I reached out and it all went really well. So it was a good choice, I think.
Had you ever read supernatural fan fiction?
Yes, I have read some supernatural fan fiction. Oh gosh, I have some bookmarks on AO3.
Yeah, I was going to ask, would you consider yourself like a supernatural fan? Would you consider yourself in the supernatural fandom? Because I do
consider myself a supernatural fan. And given that I've, read so much fan fiction, I think that counts towards being in the fandom. Even if I wasn't I was not really a a poster or a content creator there. So yes, in that case, yes, I would consider myself in the supernatural fandom.
Brilliant. Bear with me 1 second. I have a different document to open up. Please proceed without me.
So did you watch the show did you watch the entire show?
Oh, yes, I have.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I'm starting to really enjoy that. Unfortunately, yes.
I was one of the weekly viewers where you
were. Did you just start at the beginning?
Not from the very beginning. Well, not from the very beginning. It's such a long show.
Yeah.
I started watching it live in season 8, season 9.
Wow.
Okay.
And so then after that, it doesn't feel like that much of a chore because it's like one episode a week. And it was something really fun to look forward to. So I have seen the whole show.
Okay.
Through its ups and downs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Have you noticed the further and further we get away from the conclusion of the show, the more people go, unfortunately. Yes. Yes, I have experienced misery.
Oh, goodness.
Okay, follow-up question then.
Highs and lows.
Sorry, this wasn't in the document because I didn't know if you had picked Supernatural for some other kind of issue. Not issue, goodness me. some other reason, or if it was because it was also a personal interest of you. But do you have a favorite blorbo? You exist on Tumblr.
Yes.
I know you know what that word means. Because
I already outed myself as a lurker. I know the blorbos. I do.
Amazing.
I am a Dean girl. It must be said, which has been fun sometimes and less fun sometimes on following it all on Tumblr. But
valid.
Yes, he's my boy.
That's cool. That's cool. And the scales weigh another against me. Moving on. I will allow you to just pass the squirrel back and forth between yourselves and go, it's nice and light. It's cute. Let's give it some chocolate or something. Yeah. It's adorable. Yeah.
We always
over here with the moose.
So we know ups and downs show, Dean girl.
Yeah.
Then pulling it back a little bit into your research. What did you actually do? Because you said participant, observer, participant. What was your research? What did that encompass in the server? And I guess too, as a follow-up to that, what were there, when you started it, did you hit any roadblocks, at the initial starts, thinking, because I know how I am, you have all these great plans and then you actually start doing it and then you're like, oh no, wait, this actually might not work. I might need to try something different. So I didn't know if you had, how you were going to conduct your research and then if that changed due to anything while you were in the server.
Yes. Oh, it totally did.
Okay.
So what I ended up doing, let's start there, is for 5 weeks, I was a member of the Lagoon Discord server, and I literally read every single thing everyone posted.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Weeks. Did you sleep?
The answer is no. Part of it too is I am in the UK time zone, and not everyone, but a lot of people in the Lagoon were in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of activity was happening kind of late. So the answer to if I slept, no. But I read everyone's posts. I read people's fan fiction if it was if I was given permission to, or if it was posted. I didn't scroll back in anyone's Tumblrs or AO3s really.
Oh, so you didn't search out info outside of the server. It was literally whatever was contained in the server.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Because it's a master's project, there's got to be some pretty strict boundaries.
Gotcha.
Mostly just so that I don't go crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But
is it,
you go
sorry.
ahead.
No, does it also sort of contain if it was a 5-week project, it has to be a snapshot of that 5 weeks. You can't sort of go outside of that and start pulling things from 2 or 3 years ago, for example. It's whatever you see in that period. Is that part of it as well?
It is. And actually primarily for ethical reasons, not even, practical reasons. Because if someone has given me permission to be in the server, and we can talk too about the challenges of getting permission from everyone.
Yeah.
But they've agreed for me to be in the server for 5 weeks. I didn't ask, and they did not give explicit permission for me to therefore investigate their entire, past several years of fandom life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I definitely was very cognizant of, even after I was still in the server, but had finished my participant observation period, I didn't read any more posts. I was in the server. I was there to answer questions, but I literally turned my gaze away from reading anything else, because once I was done watching, I didn't want people to feel like I was still looking over their shoulder.
Gotcha.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the most of the research that I did, was just watching, and taking notes on different things that I thought were interesting. But then I also did one-on-one interviews with a lot of people, and then I hosted a group discussion in the server where we all talked about what makes a good reader insert fan fiction and why people are drawn to that genre.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a little bit of focus groupy element to that as well. So I mixed it up a little bit, but the bulk of what ended up in my paper came out of the watching and the reading.
I gotta ask too then, if you were reading fiction that was posted, were you ever in a spot where you're like, darn it, I want to read more of this story and I can't because I can't go clicking outside of say if something had been posted previously about it, that maybe you were in the middle of a part or something like that. So how hard was it because did you have to kind of split yourself in a way? When you're researching and observing, how do you kind of oh, I really wish I could, but I can't, was it just you couldn't go outside no matter what, but was there a struggle within for you?
Oh, there was, because there were so many good writers in this server. I remember reading one and I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. It's part 1. Do I think that they'll finish part 2 in the time that I have given myself? And they didn't. But all in all, just there's so many really fantastic writers. So as a fan, I really did want to engage in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
And I think if I let myself, it wouldn't have been the end of the world, but maybe just something for a larger project. Because I think it is important still to, as an ACA fan, since we've introduced that term,
right,
to let yourself also be a fan of something. That's where a lot of your passion comes from. That's why you want to do research on a topic. So it just, I think, be a shame to not let yourself be a little bit fanish about the research you're doing.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I'm just sort of thinking about what we've just finished, a group of us, Sandra, and when does your passion become work? And if you don't sort of take the time to step back and enjoy it, then it will just become tedious and work, and you'll have ruined your own enjoyment of a thing. And I'm not saying that that's what I've done, but and in a minute for sure. But that is also why I could not do what you do, Nicole. I could not be a researcher. If I was researching anything, it would have to be something science based or maths based that had answers that I wouldn't, something that isn't going to draw me in. I'm not going to go start hunting atoms down dark alleys, I'd be I'll leave that at work. Because I wouldn't be able to have the restraint not even from the research point of view, but I suppose then if you go and seek that out, then does that not blur lines where you go, is that going to interfere with how you're interpreting your findings, or is the actual research that you're doing going to interfere with how you just get to enjoy something as a fan? Yeah, no.
That's actually a really good point that you bring up about not just blurring boundaries for work-life balance, which is huge, but also blurring boundaries with how you're interpreting things. And I think this is maybe I don't want to sound too much this is an anthropology 101 lecture, but this is a big question in anthropology. What does objective mean? Can you be objective about the people you're researching? Can you be objective about interpreting the things that people tell you? and I'm very firmly, and I think the discipline as a whole tends towards this, I firmly believe that the answer is no, you can't be objective. And if you can't, then lean into it and be honest about what you find interesting, why you find it interesting, it's called positionality, like how you're positioned in the world and what you bring to a project.
Yeah.
Because I think like I said, the reason I wanted to do this was I was in a Discord server and I thought it was so interesting.
Yeah.
And would I have done the research project if I didn't already have a connection to the space? Well, I wouldn't know about the space. And so there's some ways that it's a help to already care about something. And of course, there's some ways in which someone could read what I've written and go, okay, but she's a fan. Of course, she thinks that what they're doing is radically cooperative and inherently interesting. So there might be some people who look at work from an ACA fan or from an anthropologist and go, well, that's not objective. And they'd be right. But I think that's a strength as well, basically.
Yeah, and I think you could make exactly the same argument from the alternate side. If this research project had been handed to someone who had no interest in supernatural or fan fiction or fandom in general, or, you know, the kind of collaboration that comes from that, and handed them this and gone, replicate this research or go do this research, you could then make the argument that they have not probed as deeply as they could have done, or they have not observed as closely as they could have done because they have no interest in the subject. It's very surface level,
exactly.
There's an argument to be made both ways. This is fascinating because my brain leans sort of more towards science and that kind of thing. So I'm kind of like, this is like the brain studying the brain, and it's really difficult to it's a difficult thing to, because like when you come down to it, you're like a human being is an 8-pound piece of kind of low-key jelly piloting a mech suit made of bone. And the concept of that studying someone else from any kind of capacity is really fascinating to me. And I really do think that the kind of biases that you cannot escape that, because it's you effectively. Yeah. It's not, it's not like studying atoms or, something in nature or plants. It's you. So anything you find is reflected immediately back on you. There's no plausible way to be like, no, that's I'm not affected by this. Because what if you find out like some secret serial killer or something, and you're like, oh God, do I have it? Oh my God! Like, yeah, no,
yeah. It's very. That's the energetic part about doing research with people to me, because it's, in my opinion, not a science. It's going to be an art.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it's not any less truthful or any less valuable. It's just that it's a different way of getting at knowledge, which is, I guess, as someone who likes to write and likes to think about things that don't have answers, I tend towards that myself.
Yeah. I think Sandra tends a little bit towards that as well. You don't necessarily need an answer. You just like...
I like hearing thoughts and ideas. I don't necessarily need to... Yeah. I find the journey fascinating, I think, a little bit more than necessarily the destination part of it.
We are very different people.
Yeah, I know.
I am much more science fact based. So I'm like, no, I need an answer. The journey is irrelevant. Tell me the answer. Tell me what the, so
and I don't think I wasn't always that way in school. Like in school, I really liked math because I was like, there's an answer to this. I know there's one answer to this, but I didn't like necessarily, English wasn't my favorite, which is kind of funny now that I love to write, but you kind of just, you learn that there's something outside of what the expected answer is. I think as you get older, because a lot of times in school, it's like, well, you're expected to know this, this, and this, or this is what you need to come out of, and that again is based off of who's teaching it, right? Where you're learning it from. some people just can't get out of their own head. You just can't. You can't get out of your own head in general. You're stuck with it.
You live
so,
that.
Yeah. So you just got to deal with it. And
That's where the jelly lives.
That's where the jelly lives. So yeah, I think that it's, I don't know. Again, I just think that's over time. And I know I've changed a lot, my thoughts and views on that too. But, I do like definitely having a conclusion to something, but I think I'm also more about like, I want to experience the journey, through it as well. And I just love talking for a lurker. I love talking to people about a subject I love, right? Like as much as, Supernatural's had its ups and downs, it's something that Casey and I could talk about ad nauseum and probably will do for a little bit longer, but it's great to have that connection with people who are especially have that same really strong feeling, and it could be in very different directions, but have a strong feeling about the same thing. And I think that's what's great about the community that's built in places like the Discord server, the Lagoon and stuff like that. You talked about permission issues. What were some things because there's a lot of people you had to kind of like
it's a big
get
place,
the okay for. How did that go about? How did that turn out for you?
Well, let me see if I can remember. There were about 125 people in the server, and that actually increased while I was doing the research, which is another layer of this. And
now we're talking active that you knew you would have to get like that. To me, that's another question because
active versus inactive.
Yeah,
this was total.
Okay, gotcha.
I reached out to the moderators of the Lagoon, and we chatted about how to best get at this because all the moderators were very excited about the project. They all were, full speed ahead. But what about everyone else? And so we chatted about this, and they said that there were about maybe like 10 to 20 actually active members.
Okay.
And that we should maybe just focus on getting permission from those people because, like I said, I'd only be collecting data from the people who were actively posting in those 5 weeks. So the people who weren't active, I wouldn't be using them at all. So there was that element of it. And what we ended up coming up with was running a series of polls in Discord. We set up one channel that was, I only had access to like that channel and a couple other like rules and instructions channels while the poll was running to see how everyone thought about the project and see if they had any questions or concerns that I could address. And that part ended up not being as much as I was worried about it, because everyone was also really excited there. We had like more votes in the poll than the moderators knew were active members.
Okay.
Oh, lovely.
That's good.
So it was a great voting turnout. And there wasn't anyone who had voted no, I shouldn't do the project, or anyone even who had a question that expressed real reservations about it. I was the one who was bringing up all of this consent and ethics and all of these potential gnarly issues. And then everyone's like, oh, wow, yeah, that sounds good.
Good. Yeah, so I remember hearing about it. So I'm like reading all of your stuff and like, just getting the details and stuff about it. So it was definitely, it was approached well. So I think it was all handled really well. You were very, very in depth. You basically what if'd yourself, I think, to death, which was good.
I did because, and it was a little behind the scenes info, but in order to do the project, I had to get ethics approval from my university. And that process, oh my gosh, I was doing what ifs that I had never considered before. Well, one of them was like, what if I get doxxed? What if it goes poorly or someone gets angry with me about something? And what if that becomes a threat to me? And I was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought of that. What if?
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of things. And so you guys saw the end product of all of the little like ethics and consent documents that I had put together.
Yeah.
And then if a new member came, like I said, like total membership grew while I was there,
Mm-hmm.
I reached out to them individually and
Okay.
explained the project and gave them the option to opt out
Okay.
so that I wouldn't use anything that they wrote or sent or posted.
Gotcha.
But then again, no one opted out. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for the idea of doing research on fan communities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Within fan spaces. I think there's a kind of a hunger for acknowledgement or someone to like step back and say, no, you guys are so interesting, because you are.
Mm-hmm.
We are.
I think-
I'm including myself in that. Yeah.
I think that's a really important point in fandom spaces, not being observed from outsiders, because that does give you, I don't know, I think fandoms become more accepted, but looking back a decade or more, it was kind of considered strange and weird, and fan fiction was considered strange and weird, and it gave you very much a sense of being scrutinized and observed.
Yes.
So I think, immersing yourself in the space and going, no, you just carry on. I'm just going to be here.
You guys keep rocking your awesome selves. I'll just be here.
Yeah. And that kind of, when you were saying about nobody, raising any concerns or not wanting to be involved, I wonder how much of that is because it is a digital space. Because there's a whole world of difference between, hey, can I come and hang out in your living room and watch you live your life, versus, hey, can I come and hang out online with you? And there's very much a sense of security, as in, I mean, obviously doxing is a real threat, and internet safety, and we all saw the commercials, but there is as a person, there's an inherent sense of security in that this person only has access to information you give them, because you assume that that person is operating ethically. They're not going to go and track down your work address and turn up and be like, "Hiya," because that would be very fucking weird. But yeah, I wonder. I want to study that. I want somebody to study that and be like, hello, here's the difference between digital research versus in real life research and how it's changed anthropology. That's fucking interesting to me.
I can send you guys some citations. There's some really cool work being done on that. I'll say too that I was really conscious of this about privacy, anonymity. I can't even say that word correctly. Anonymity.
That's okay.
Because it was something that I didn't want to push people on. Traditionally, anthropology wants to know literally everything about a person. They want to know their religion. They want to know if they have a good relationship with their family. They want to know if they get into arguments with people at city council meetings. And this was a very different approach, because I know that there's a certain level of expectation around privacy online. So if, for instance, I was doing an interview with someone and they didn't want to do a video interview, they didn't want their face included in my research, my reaction is, yes, of course. You don't have to share anything with me that you don't want, which was kind of actually a challenge, not to me or the project, but trying to explain that to more old-fashioned anthropologists at the university. But I kind of feel very strongly that fandom is still kind of stigmatized. It is still kind of embarrassing for people, whether or not it should be. I think people really valued me saying, hey, no, I don't even need to hear your voice. We can have an interview where we just, message each other back and forth on Discord. Because some people too, English wasn't their first language. And they were insecure about having a voice or a video call. So I really wanted to meet people where they were at, just as a person, not even as an ethics thing, but I think making good relationships with people is important for research, but more so as a human being. I just didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a bit about to haul us off track here. Sorry, Nicole. Is that kind of a changing attitude within the field of study now? You mentioned previously anthropologists would want to know literally everything down to your social security number, but not really. But maybe, you know what I mean? So is that something that's kind of, becoming more of a topic of discussion, like the more sort of snapshot of someone's life of what they're willing to share with you versus being maybe too invasive, as might have been the case in the past, probably was the case in the past. I don't want to pass judgment. Do you understand?
Oh, no, this is actually really interesting because the field of anthropology has a really, I guess, up and down history. It was invented as functionally a colonial tool to study people who were actively being colonized at the time. Some of the most early ethnographies were of white British and later white American philosophers and scientists literally showing up without warning to a community of people and going, hi, I'm going to be living here now and writing down everything you do, and I'm going to be sending it back to England. And they will use that to write like racist screeds about how backwards and primitive you are.
Why is it always my people? Always my people.
Well, to be fair to you,
fucking hell.
Americans did it too. Americans did it too.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going to go with right away. I was like, oh, man.
I don't know if we're not a little bit responsible for that as well. That sounds like something we did.
God.
It definitely sounds like us.
You guys invented anthropology. You guys invented the discipline, and so all the issues at its inception.
To be fair, there's an argument to be made that Britain, like as a concept, invented going to other places and going, "Aye, we live here now."
Yeah.
Proceed.
A little bit.
Yeah,
but it's a lot of disciplines were kind of in the same boat, thinking about even like really objective ones, like
science, right?
Like natural science.
Yeah.
Natural science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wanting to prove something, that you like you said, there's always a bent to it or a side, you know what I mean? Like you might want to prove something because of this. Like there's another motive or something. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so in terms of where anthropology has been going, we've had several like miniature revolutions in the field that are always seeming to be like, but wait, we don't actually know anything. So there were a couple of like turns where people started questioning if an anthropologist could ever truly be like immersed in a culture, if they could ever truly know something about another culture, if there was a role for people in that culture to do anthropology on themselves, if we should be focusing not just on this exotic other, or if we should be doing anthropology on us, Westerners, what even is the West, what even is the other, like all sorts of these like philosophical and ethical questions. And I think that there's still a good reason to know the entirety of a place or a person. It's called Wholeism. There's a lot of different definitions for Wholeism, but in anthropology, it means trying to get the whole context. You want to know the history of the region. You want to know the politics. You want to know the role of religion, and you want to know that like how people interact with those. And so if you're hanging out in someone's living room, a lot of this will just happen naturally, just through conversation, not even you digging in.
Yeah.
But if you're online, that's the big question right now, methodologically. And I took the route of this is partial, this is not whole, and kind of no anthropology is completely whole. There's always going to be gaps. There's always going to be things that you don't know. And so I leaned into it. I said, yes, this is incomplete. This is not the whole picture of these people's lives. And I do think for future research, I'd be interested in doing something a little bit more attempting at getting at people's offline lives, which I think is a harder question and a harder thing to do because you need so much more trust.
Yeah.
You need to actually know the person and not do what I did, which is just mostly like hang around for 5 weeks. You don't know anyone after 5 weeks. So I think once a PhD is longer anyway, so I think that is something I want to aim towards, actually getting to know the people more than just what they post. Because I think there's stuff for like there's reasons that all of it's interesting and relevant. But you have to
yeah.
have the trust. You
Yeah.
have to have the trust.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking now it's like that kind of background definitely influences what people write and how they write it and what kind of process they have. And, that kind of thing would be super interesting to dive into. But also, there is inherently a disconnect between who you are online and who you are in real life, that I think probably should be factored in, because just because somebody mentioning no names writes filthy, kinky porn on the internet.
Who said that?
Mentioning no names. It's me. That has absolutely no bearing on my family life, on my work life. It's very, very much a division of self that I also think would be really fucking interesting. I'm moving over, guys. I'm abandoning science. Fuck, I have questions.
Like, if there is a disconnect, that is also, I think, to an anthropologist, oh, that's interesting. Like, let's say someone writes filthy, kinky porn on the internet, and they're asexual in their actual life, which is a huge common thing. And the question then is like, wow, okay, how does that work? And I mean, it can make a lot of sense once you get to know the person or get to know the broader context of both internet culture and maybe their life. I don't know. That's the thing where like more research is needed, because for some people, I would interview with them and they're like, oh yeah, my partner knows I write fan fiction. I've done AUs where I give the character my job. This is a thing that I consider myself very unified online and offline. And then there's some people who are like, no one knows I write fan fiction. I keep it completely secret. This is my online life. And maybe they're out online, but they're not out in real life. And so there's all sorts of ways that different people react differently to this divide. And I think that there is like value in investigating it. But like I said, like you would need a lot more time and trust than this project had the space for.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking about me and you, Sandra. We come from, while not, I would say, similar backgrounds in terms of family and things like that. Obviously, there's a whole world of difference, starting primarily with being different nationalities. But there's a lot of overlap in between me and Sandra's kind of upbringing and lives and things like that. And we write for vastly different purposes, not even just the content of what we write, the reasons that we write. I'm poking nerves going, what happens if we do? Oh God, no, fuck, right, moving on. Where Sandra's like, I'm going to pretend none of this happens and I'm going to make a lovely fantasy.
I want to fix it, and make it immediately like, let's treat Dean the way I want him to be treated, kind of a situation. I think it's more about, I mean, that's what we talk about all the time, especially when we talk to different writers. Like, why do they write? What interests them? What do they? And everybody's got a different viewpoint. Everybody's got a different reason, and it's just so interesting to hear how background or how somebody does. Just as any writer, I think, does, you put a little bit of yourself or a little bit of your experience in order for it to resonate and to feel real. Yeah. You put a little bit of that in you, but it's not necessarily all of you. Or you do like I did. You write a character that's pretty much stamped like me in the universe, and had a husband that died. I have to explain to my husband. Oh, sweetie, no, it's got nothing to do with you.
Not you.
So it's like it's those kinds of situations, where there's that bleed and that overlap of real life and writing, and I can see the whole like process of how much of it really does, I don't know, becomes like sort of like stigmatizing to the writers too. But those are questions I've got coming. So I think we'll probably get there too. But yeah, it's always an interesting, where does it come from? Where does it come from?
This is stressful, man. Every question doesn't have an answer. Just those 5 more questions.
See? There you
go. Sorry. You guys got to write dissertations now.
Yeah.
No, I'm going back to
I've
maths.
passed along the curse.
That makes maths has answers. Science has Science has an answer. We might not be able to get to it right now, but it has an answer. This is like that's a great question, but what about? And then there's like 10 more questions.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what the exciting part of, exciting and was stressful in the writing of it. Because I came into the project thinking I'm going to write about people's writing processes. I'm going to include like where they write, physically. I'm going to include like what apps they use to write, how physical they are. Like if they write with a pen and paper, or they use, I don't even know, like
or some people like on their phone. Some people do it on their phone. Some people do it on like an actual computer. Yeah, they do
writing is
phone
a
on the
computer
bus,
job.
like,
Writing is a laptop job. That's a sit down job. One of my best friends writes on her phone. She's just finished a 90,000 word fic on her phone, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean? And like, she edits it on her phone. She does everything on her phone, and I'm like,
oh God, that's stressful just thinking about all of that.
Doesn't that stress you out though? She does that all the time, and I'm like, no, that is a sit down job. That is not that's not a phone job. That's a sit down job.
Yeah, that stuff was so interesting to me because everyone who did it seemed in shock that people did it a different way. It was so interesting. And then more questions started coming up, and I was following different threads. And then all of a sudden, my dissertation is not about that anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So, to your point, Casey, it's like, there's too many questions, and I could have written 10 dissertations going different ways and exploring different things. And I hope people do write more dissertations about this because, oh gosh, it's when you're studying social life, there is no end to it. There's no place where something just stops. This is where like the wholeism comes in and the whole like relation to people's lives. Because everything is related, and if you tug on one string, it unravels over here, and
that's incredibly stressful. That's incredibly stressful. I don't necessarily need the answer, but I do need a natural conclusion somewhere down the line. I could, because you would like that. How would you even quantify that? How would you be like, I'm going to examine this one thing, and then like you say, you look at that one thing, and then five strings fall out over here, and you're like, no. This one I wouldn't. I'm a mess. I'd be pulling strings all over the place, like, wee, let's see what happens. And that, friends, is why I am not a researcher of anything. I know some shit, but I can't do this because, God, I drive myself mad. So cool, though.
I did feel pretty mad when I was writing it. Why it took so long.
Yeah, I can imagine. Did you, when you were writing it, did you find it difficult to sort of? You must have had such an enormous wealth of information. Did you find it difficult to pick one thread to kind of see through the dissertation? Did you have ideas that you sort of like put down? Are you like, no, not this? I have more information on like.
Oh yeah. I cut a whole section actually, and that was just after I'd already decided to follow one like strand of inquiry. It was about like I said, like the actual hows of people writing. I was going to have this section where I used this kind of anthropological theory to examine how people walk to write, or physical when they can't, when they're stuck with something, they'll pace, or maybe they'll go on a walk around, or maybe they will walk in a mental space. Like some people will like play scenes like movies, and I was curious on like the imagination and walking connection. And as you can tell, it was just slightly not connected enough to the rest of it, and I cut the whole thing. And then I wanted to talk a bit.
Nicole, you don't understand. I need that. I need you to write that because so I need that. I would get shit done.
It was, and then a lot of people. I wanted to pull on the thread of why reader insert a lot more than I ended up doing, because that's really interesting to me. We were talking about the relation or separation between what you write and who you are. And reader insert to me is this really messy tangle of that, where these are not actual self-inserts for the most part, in that they are characters that people write that are, Y-N. or they're like original characters who are just fully realized characters. But there's a lot of, people assume there's a lot of identification with these, like, especially female characters or female readers. And what is the relationship to the reader's body, the imaginary reader, the relation that character has? Oh, there's so much stuff. And I'm like, I don't have time for that.
Oh my gosh.
So I think that's what I'm interested in, like tugging on that string, especially in for like future research, because the relationship of the body to what we read and what we write, I think is incredibly interesting, especially when, and not to, I don't know, not to be embarrassing, but especially when it's porn, especially when it's kinky, because then your body is so related to what you're reading and writing. Yeah. So I think that would be a really cool research topic that did not make it at all into my current research topic.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful that I have an answer for that, though. My brain is sitting there going, it's cleaner. I can do whatever I want and I don't have to wash the sheets afterwards.
Yeah.
That's nice.
I agree. Kiki and I agree on that.
Yeah, like that as a concept. That's just
it's you could do a lot of things and not have to worry about the repercussions afterwards. Yeah. So
I'm sorry, it's not a really deep like reflection of self. I'm just like, no, they could be fully gross and not have to clean up afterwards. That's the best. I don't have to write. And
this is the real fantasy.
You don't have to write. And then she got up to pee, so she didn't get a urinary infection. And then she got to the shower because it was sticky. And then to wash the shit. Like, you don't have to do that. You could just be like, and fade to black. Yes, beautiful.
Yes.
I do. I mean, and again, we are going to. I'm going to try to bring it back to the paper in a second.
Sandra has so many questions. I'm so sorry.
No. But my thing too is that, like, for me. And I've talked about this. We've talked about this in another episode, I think, too. Fan fiction is like the emotional part of the porn. I think that I don't know. For me, it feels like we need, and I'm broad stroking it, but like if you do male and female, like I feel like females need this connection in order for the porn to have meaning. And sometimes it could just be porn with porn, but we've also got a connection to certain characters that we're writing about, or there's a connection there that I think outside of like, maybe what was considered, like just the porn industry in general is a little bit different. I was going to ask in the dissertation. So because you're kind of talking about like trying to figure out the couple of like talking points, like when you kept pulling the thread, I noticed that a lot of the talk is about collective cognition. In your paper. What is it and how was it exemplified in the group of fanfic writers for you when you did that?
Yes. So I think there's a thing that people immediately think of when they think collective cognition, which is groupthink, which has like a really negative connotation. And to be clear, that is not what I was arguing in the paper at all. I was not saying that there was groupthink in this like server, the Lagoon.
Is that kind of like a hive mind kind of thing?
Yes. I didn't want, there's all of this research about like mob mentality or like people's brains when they're really riled up about something in a group. And to be clear, that's not what the connection I'm drawing is. I am using collective cognition more in the sense of thinking is social. It's something that we do together at all stages of thinking, and it's neutral. That's a neutral fact. It's not that people are less original or less creative if they think socially, or they get inspiration from all sorts of other people and things. It's that's just how thinking works. We all do it, and that's how inspiration, to my understanding, just functions. That's you can't do anything in a vacuum.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to say. Nobody exists in a vacuum. Like a visual artist, a painter, sees something and is inspired. a comedian observes and writes on the nobody exists in a vacuum. I did not even know that was a thing that people were.
And like, oh yeah, especially with writing, I think people have this idea that a writer is someone who, sits in the dark and has an idea and sits at a
by candlelight with a quill.
Yes.
Very, very Poe. Yeah.
Or like the Stephen King model, which is like you get inspired, you write and write and write and write, and at the end you have a book and you send it to your editor and you send it to your publisher, and it was
Stephen King has an editor. I'm sorry, that was so mean. I'm sorry.
His editor is his cocaine.
I'm sorry.
We love you, King. We love you, King.
No, we don't. No, we don't. No, we don't. I was about to get real tense in this Zoom call. Hi.
Oh my gosh, Stephen King, don't listen to this.
Yeah, Stephen King, a notorious listener. When he's not, slaying people on Twitter, he's catching up with a weekly idling. No, yes. I have tried many, many times, and me and Stephen King's work do not gel. And I have just accepted that is just a fact of life. But unfortunately, I'm going to make jokes about the fact that if somebody had just sat down and been like, Steve, babe, with looks like half the book, and it's the same story. Shh. Uh-huh. Like how many times does he need to describe the same town in Maine?
I mentioned that my other fandom that inspired the project was It by Stephen King.
You did.
Mm-hmm. And that is a classic case of like, honey, if you just had an editor, we would not be in this
like
mess.
Over 1,000. I've read that book like 2 or 3 times in my lifetime.
Huge.
It's really long.
It's over 1,000 pages.
Yeah.
And I really like, here's the thing. I watched the new movies and I really like them. I would really like to read that book, but unfortunately, Steve, babes, I can't listen to you describe this town every fucking 4. And like, just in case the Stephen King fans in the audience are shouting pitchforks and stuff like that, I share the same views about Tolkien, and I adore Lord of the Rings. And I share the same fucking views about Tolkien. Babes, you spent like half a chapter on adore. And I just really feel like maybe somebody should have been like, John.
Rein it in.
A little bit. Just it's a lovely door. You've made a beautiful picture of a door. It's beautiful. I think we could lose half of it and people are still going to know what the fucking door looks like. So I just think in terms of the master of horror, and this is when Nicole leaves the Zoom and she's like, fuck yeah. In terms of the master of horror, for me personally, it's James Herbert. I've tried. Steve, I'm sorry. I know you're listening.
Herbert.
Sorry.
That's okay. We can agree to disagree.
See?
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. But I just could not let that edit comment. So isn't that it?
Okay.
Really? that was a long tangent to me to be like, I think Stephen King writes too much.
Well, I guess that's to loop it back. This is kind of like the idea that people have too of like, because he famously does not use an editor enough. And so his books are perceived to be like his work. I mean, his and Cocaine's work. And I think
to be fair, Cocaine is a hell of a co-writer. If you're into
co-writer, yes.
If you are into that vibe, like Steve and Cocaine have got you. They got you, fam. Go and enjoy. I don't have that much attention span, I'm afraid. It's a me problem, not a Stephen King problem.
But I think what's more real to a lot of people, and I think will probably click with like authors who are listening, is that a lot of the creative process is something that you do with other people. Yeah. You're talking excitedly about your ideas with someone and they are boosting your energy or maybe adding ideas, or you are like having a back and forth about a plot problem, or you're even like something formalized, like getting feedback like from a beta reader or from a writing workshop. There's all sorts of ways that people are helping you think through things. And that thinking is, I guess, where the collective cognition comes in. I see that what was going on in the lagoon, like not even just the really formal elements, like people getting beta readers, but just in the way that people were chit-chatting and making jokes and having like fun with each other. These are all things I think that pointed to ways that they were thinking together. They were getting ideas together. They were like creating an energy in the server that I think was conducive as people, but then also conducive as creatives. And the creativity is where I think the cognition element comes in.
Yeah. Are you paying attention, Sandra? Are you writing that down? Write that down.
Yeah, you can go ahead. You can go ahead, but there's differences.
No. Write that down.
Yeah, no.
Sharing the creative process.
I literally,
engaging with people. Sandra
in
Halls.
my discussion with Nicole, I did talk about this too, where
Yes.
there is, to me, a process that does not necessarily fall in line with the way a lot of other people write fan fiction. And again, I don't think that that's wrong. It's just different. And I don't think my stories suffer any from
Absolutely not.
them maybe not having all of those parts of it. Just like someone who does write in that way, their work is great too. It's just that I won't say the P word because Casey will giggle, but how I go about writing is different. But I like the idea or the prompt or the what if, but then it's very much, how do I create that once I get that part? So again, it's really interesting to see how different people write to complete. And I think that's kind of like my next question is like, is fanfic the seed that produces a fandom ecosystem? Like, what are the things that you need to keep an ecosystem like this healthy? Obviously not, you need less of me because I'm not going to do. No,
you're great.
No, but seriously, like in a fandom space, like if it was all lurkers, nothing would happen. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like,
yes, but you have your own place.
No. I know that, but
that sounded very self-depreciating, and I don't like that.
No. But what I'm saying is, if you talk about the ecosystem, there has to be a nutrient. There have to be resources. So I think, in that aspect, I might be a good resource. You know what I mean? But there's a lot of different parts that make up an ecosystem, and for fandom, you know what I mean. In general, if you talk about a fandom ecosystem, this question's for Nicole. Casey can comment after. But like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, is this fanfic just kind of like help produce the ecosystem, or is it like the chicken or the egg or the chicken? Like, what comes first, like in your mind, and what do you need to have it thrive?
That is a really good question.
Thank you. I thought so.
That's a good question.
And I was thinking about this in the lead up into this interview, because I think that I tried to explain in the dissertation just how fragile I think the ecosystem is of fandom, and to the point of like people write differently as well. A lot of people only interact with the community at very specific points, either like to like or to comment or to reblog something to circulate it. And that's still a social act that is bolstering the ecosystem. And let's see. So I think in terms of like the people who don't use beta readers, I talk to so many people who don't use beta readers. I think that is then, if we consider like the ecosystem a connection of different things in like nodes of interaction, the beta reader is a particularly fragile node in that not everyone uses it. People who want to don't always succeed in getting one. And so it's a place where it's either people are going to interact with each other or not. But that doesn't mean the whole thing crashes down.
Right.
It means that there are other places to get interaction if you need it. Or that it's just not going to work out for everyone all the time. And that creates like the messiness of social interaction.
Or the resources are scarce. Like, I mean, I know situations where
time.
And beta's like, again, like just from a Casey, myself, and our friend Dreamer recently doing the Big Bang. Like, you got to find a beta reader. And if you've never used a beta reader, you have to either hope that you have a friend who can beta read it, or sometimes there's one glorious person who becomes the beta reader, like everybody.
Yes.
And it's just like, if you didn't have that resource, and then that resource gets really like pulled apart and stretched, right?
It
like
does.
During that time. So it's like a
That
supply
beta reader
demand.
then, the beta reader then just maybe gets tired that day, or has a life event happen, or has been stretched so thin that they can't follow through on obligations.
Yeah.
This was something that came up a lot in talking to beta readers as part of this project. People were tired.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. It's so in terms of like resources and nutrients, I do think it's people first. And I'm not convinced on it. We can maybe chat about that, because I think what the energy and the driving force of fandom is definitely the people in it. So like the betas, the readers, the authors are all not more important than the fan fiction, but I do think they're first, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the fan fiction, I think itself, like we talked about energy, we talked about passion and how that's so important in keeping interested in something. And I think that's the role of fan fiction. It is the product of the ecosystem. It is like the whole ecosystem encapsulated in a piece of writing. Because in order for the fan fiction to have existed, someone needs to have watched a show that they really like, or a movie or a book, and probably read some other fan fiction. There needs to be readers. It needs to be posted somewhere. There's inspiration drawn from both the fandom and the show and fiction and reality. And so without the broader, ecosystem to swim around in, I think the fan fiction would look so different.
We've had this discussion, and I think it's even more notable talking to other writers too, especially when you talk about the different platforms and how reader engagement has changed, even just in terms of like the supernatural fandom, right? Because we talk about it like there's no new canon coming out. It was almost 5 years out from the close of the show, and we've got people that kind of like who were maybe a part of the fandom in its heyday, and they do notice this like this drop in engagement here and there, and so that there does have to be this urge, this need within people to continue to create and do it. And then there's also on the other end of it, like as a writer, and I've seen a lot of people even talk about this, I think a lot more on Tumblr, where the way you engage on Tumblr can be very different. And it's almost like a learning. You have to learn how to use this to get more eyeballs on a story for other people to read. And if you're just liking, that's great. But like a writer's like, unless it's reblogged, it doesn't necessarily get to more people for other people to see. And it kind of like can just wither and die. So it kind of like needs this, it's just this constant cycle of writing, response, kind of like, call response kind of a thing that I think needs to continue to happen. In some way, you either have a really thriving plant or you have something that like I wouldn't know what to do with, and it's hanging outside by my window and it's died because I haven't looked at it in a few days.
Oh, that's unfortunate. I forgot to water the fandom and now it's dead.
But kind of like I kind of feel like that's what it's like. Everybody's got their part, like you said, in it, and it's like how much do you want to continue to see it grow, or just maintain itself.
And I think there's an interesting, if we want to extend the metaphor to, let's talk about climate change. I think in terms of people shifting platforms that they use, the kinds of learned ways of being social are different on all those platforms.
Yeah.
And as people change their expectations about what engagement looks like, I think we start to see different behaviors in the fandom, and that might lead to some like systematic level deprivation of nutrients. So let's say, like, to use like the ecosystem metaphor, you have a grassland And as shifting understandings of agriculture happen, you use more and more pesticides, you use more and more fertilizers, and that changes the quality of the soil. And it's
AI.
harder for life.
Oh, the bees! We went totally different fucking places there, Sandra.
I was still thinking of fan fiction, so I went to AI because I've seen like that's a big thing now too. You know what people are doing.
It
with
is.
it. Yeah.
It's changing how people are interacting with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the level of like suspicion people have, or the level of human personness that is expected to be in all fan fiction. And then two, like there's people coming from TikTok. And this is, I see this discourse circle every once in a while where people are like, I can't believe these TikTokers think AO3 has an algorithm. Because people are used to engaging in a certain way or being fed content versus seeking out content.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
If there's a more passive understanding of fandom, I think that affects the ecosystem, which is why I think that the people are the drivers here.
Yeah.
Because if the readers are acting differently, that's going to make all sorts of other things more fragile.
Yeah.
There's going to be less of a community. And, you know, I don't know what it would look like otherwise. I guess the energy would die down. At least I think it would die down. So the fan fiction, I think, is more of a product of that collective energy. Even if it's written completely solo, even if you are like not engaged in fandom other than just posting your work, I still think that it's this encapsulation of this larger ecosystem, which is not to say it's always under threat, but it's always changing and becoming, you know, more or less fragile in different ways.
Yeah.
That's so weird mentioning TikTok, because I was thinking like that is something I struggled with. I only ever posted to AO3, and then I was participating in a bingo that required me to post to Tumblr, post like the full story, not just a link outside. And I don't post my works to Tumblr at all because I find that really difficult. Because I'm like, what do you mean I have to help people find it? What? Because you post it,
things,
you post it on AO3, and as long as I put all the right tags in, like, and even if I don't, people will still see it because there is no algorithm. It's literally a library, and that works great for me. And then I go over to Tumblr, and I'm like, what do you mean I need to use tags and market? What do you mean I need to keep reblogging? What? No, I don't like that.
There's more pressure on the author at that point too. And in terms of resources, like we were talking about betas getting tired. Oh my God, I should ask you guys, do you think that authors, including yourselves, get tired of having to like always self-promote or market or move the fic and put it in front of eyeballs?
Yes.
I hate marketing, so that's an initial like impediment for me. But as somebody that, you know, does write, like I write romance, and I'm just like, but I am starting to realize the importance, you know, of just marketing, like in general. But yeah, like I don't do a lot of promotion. So AO3 was like my first, just putting my stuff out there in a big fanfic world. I mean, I did a little bit of Wattpad, but that was for a different fandom. You know, AO3 was supernatural for me. And using Tumblr, finding writers on Tumblr was what gave me finding AO3. But yeah, it's very hard. It's another job. We're talking about tags for Big Bangs. And it's like, you know, you're like, our friend is like, you know, I want to make sure like I have all my bases covered. Like everybody can like, you know, find my space. But then you talk to other writers who they don't do a lot of heavy tagging for their stuff. I guess it's a lot of too, like, what are you expecting to get out of the process as a writer? Like, because if you were going to write just to write for yourself, you would never post it anywhere. It would just be for you.
No, I want eyeballs on my fic, and I want comments telling me how great it is, and I would have to put exactly zero effort into getting that. I have written it, I have formatted it, and I have put it on the internet, and my job is done.
Yeah, and that's not going to work.
Excuse you, that's working out great for me on AOC. I think that's really interesting, though, because when you mentioned different like parts of the fandom, Sandra, what prompted Sandra, well, I mean, I don't want to speak for you here, but I know you went to Tumblr in search of a space that catered more to what you were looking for.
Mhm.
Whereas I'm very well catered for on AO3. So I don't have to go and seek that out in other places. And that's really interesting. And actually, I find other places where I have to kind of fight for engagement fucking tedious. Because then it like any kind of interaction like that invokes discussion. And I don't want discussion. I just want to be told how great it is. Just tell me how great it is and then go away. No, like I do not accept concrete. I'm not even going to say that. I do not accept concrete. If my
But you
fic
don't
is
ask
on,
for it. That's the thing.
I don't
like,
ask for
yeah.
it. No.
So that's a different thing too. Yeah.
If my stuff is on the internet, it has passed my happiness and it has passed my beta's happiness. And I don't need any constructive criticism or criticism. Just if you don't like it, move on. You know? Whereas when you're in a space like Tumblr and you are having to actively kind of market yourself and actively get yourself in front of eyeballs, you are in spaces that want to have those discussions, and I don't necessarily want to have them, and I don't want to justify my characterization or my choices. Just read it or don't. Like, I'm really not like, this is not my livelihood. I'm not Poe in a fucking dark room with a candle and a quill and a raven trying to pay my mortgage here. I'm just writing for fun. If you don't like it, move on.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference too between, you know, again, like my fanfic sort of led me to writing original romance. And now I'm like, you know, then I kind of swung back into fan fiction. And now it's like these two things are merging together. And it's realizing, I think a lot of it is realizing it through interactions in fandom spaces, how important it is to market, or you won't be seen in some places. You definitely weren't going to, you know, if you don't market, you're not going to be seen in independently published sites like Amazon, you know, like if you're doing it yourself. So it really, it gives, I think, a broader like zoom out of like how your little pieces and parts can get more people to see it based off of how much you're willing to spend time to do that little bit extra. And again, not everywhere, because like, you know, AO3 being an archive, you put it there, you know, the only other interaction you really get is comments, you know, and you engage with the people that comment, and, you know, you love the kudos, you love the comments, but there's not a lot outside of that you can, and it's kind of intentional. You know, they don't want to have it be a place that.
It's not a social media platform.
Yeah.
It's an archive. It's a library. See, this is the whole one point has another 10 questions, because now I'm thinking, I know that the digital age has made self-publishing and independent publishing much easier than it has been. But how much, like specifically you, Sandra, but also obviously also you, Nicole, how much do you think fandom writers that are branching out into original fiction are doing that because they feel like they have experience with marketing themselves on these social media platforms? Like, how much harder can marketing yourself at Amazon be when you've, you know, lived in the hell of Tumblr for 5 years? Like, affectionate. Tumblr knows what it is. Tumblr users know what it is. We all know. We're all in the same hell together. But yeah, I wonder how.
I think it's just the writing process that makes you think that you can do the things easier. I can't speak on the marketing part of it because, like, again, I don't market enough. I'm learning that I have to start to do that. So, yeah, I just think knowing you can write and knowing you get a certain reaction from people that really enjoy your work, I think gives people, I could do this. Maybe I can do this thing, and gives them the wanting to try or branch out in that regard. The marketing is not my skill or forte on that regard. Yeah.
You know, I think the question of reader engagement is so central because like you mentioned, like there's different norms in different places. There's like a culture of what kind of stuff is expected or desired, which when there's like cultural transgressions or like cultural clash, it can get kind of contentious. Like there was this kind of like internal to fan studies famous instance where a college professor in a fan fiction class, like in an English department, assigned her students to go out and read a fan fiction and comment on it. And how these students commented was not according to fan subculture norms, obviously. They were too formal. They were giving constructive criticism that had not been asked for.
Yeah.
And it was just all in all a really negative experience for the authors whose work had been read in this class without their knowledge.
Yeah.
And so it's instances like that that make me know that like readers are kind of a incredibly necessary part of the ecosystem, but also this potentially volatile part where they might not, because of this culture clash potential, there's like always this threat that someone is going to, I don't know, take the work in the wrong way or not engage with it correctly, which can be kind of stressful. Thinking too about the people who, well, talking to people in the lagoon during the interviews, a lot of people mentioned that they had been, threatened by people for the kind of stuff that they write. They had been harassed out of other platforms and other Discord servers for the stuff that they would write. And so that's a kind of readership that is undesirable. But then without readers and without engagement, we mentioned like, why write at all? Or like, why post at all? Like, you write for yourself, but you post it wanting that social element. You want to know that you've reached someone and touched them.
Yeah.
So it's definitely an ambivalent thing, I think. And that did come out a little bit in the research. Obviously, most people I talked to weren't doing professional writing. Several of them were, like you, Sandra, people who branched out into romance writing, or they had put their stuff on Patreon, like just their fandom stuff on Patreon, and were making a little bit of money that way as well, which I know is also contentious depending on the fandom space and culture. But there's ways that people create audiences.
That again is such an interesting. I cannot with this subject. 50 million questions. That again is, so take that study that you were talking about, Nicole. Nobody would have said, go write to an author, go read a novella and write an email to the author. Nobody would have done that. That just, wouldn't have been a thing. Not
a normal assignment. I mean, kids do like write fan mail, but you don't just
but not like
tell people to just respect an author as part of your class.
So it's like, again, the digital. I would like to stress, I'm a millennial. I've grown up in the digital age. Like I'm like, oh, the digital is so much better in the 60s. I'm not there at all. I'm not there at all. But again, that it breeds a familiarity. And like, I know personally, I prefer AO3 because if I don't want to have a discussion with somebody, I don't have to have a discussion with somebody, and I don't have to worry that it's going round. I feel like people are less entitled in that space on that platform. Whereas on Tumblr, I feel like, people can and do and have, and you experienced it talking in the lagoon about, with authors that have been harassed. People feel entitled to come and tell you exactly what they think is wrong with what you've done, with the art that you've made. What's wrong with it? They don't like the ship, or they don't like this, or they don't like what you've done, or that's the wrong AU, or this character wouldn't react like that. And people feel, and I don't know if it's because the source material is, kind of public space. Anybody can go watch a TV show. I don't know if it's that aspect of it, or if it's the social media aspect of it, but people feel very entitled to come and tell you all the things they think are wrong with what you've done. And how they, like our friend Dreamer, Sandra mentioned, she's had asks on Tumblr, and in no way does she advertise that she is open to requests or taking them or commissions. And she's had people go, hey, write this. And she's like, no, because what? No. And I don't know. And again, with the Patreon thing being controversial, it's your fucking art. If you want to sell it, you can sell it. I realize that gets a little bit like, oh, well, it's Warner Brothers intellectual property and blah, 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 blah. But, they can't sue all of us, is my take on that. Like, there's one of us.
And since when did we care what Warner Brothers thought about anything?
Exactly. Well, no, that's Anne Rice famously sued a whole bunch of fanfic writers and was like, not mine. So but I feel like there's Warner Bros can't sue everybody. That's kind of where I'm at with that. And maybe they'll surprise us and they will, but until such time. But it's your thing. You wouldn't say to a maybe a more traditional art, like someone who makes visual art or someone who makes music, you wouldn't say, no, you can't sell that. We're entitled to it for free. But for some reason, that's acceptable to make demands of a fan fiction author. And just, there's too many questions here. My brain. My brain needs an answer. Maybe not the answer, but an answer. That's upsetting.
Well, I'll try to spin it into, because you were talking about like how some of the writers were being harassed and stuff for various things, but maybe like what they
Idling
were
in the Impala does not condone that, by the way. I want to go on record as saying that from myself and Sandra. Don't fucking do that. That is really wanky. And we do not condone that. All right, moving on. Sorry.
But I was
gonna
ask, in the server itself in the lagoon, like how important did you find people felt like that they felt safe and accepted, like within that space? Did that get conveyed at all? Because like, again, it feels very almost insular and like, a bubble where you're accepted and, whatever, like as long as you follow, the basic rules and standards that we have in place, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Like, did you notice that more in that server, like that they kind of felt like this is a little safe space for me to go to if I am feeling something else, some kind of way outside of that?
I explicitly asked people in the interviews if the topic made itself available about how if they felt like the lagoon was a safe space for them. And the answer I got was a comparable yes, where people were like, this is so far, everyone was very cautious if they had experienced harassment in the past. The way that they talked to me was incredibly cautious. But everyone that I talked to who had been, made to feel wrong for what they had written in other places said that the lagoon was a vast improvement.
Good.
And that there were, because I think the reason for this was there were explicit norms of like, here's the channel where this shit discussion goes, and here's this not safe for work discussion area, and things were delineated that way. And then I think there was the kind of cultural expectation of we're not all going to like the same things, and let's all calm down. So I think there was a mixture of kind of formal layout of the server stuff, as well as the culture that the mods were trying to create. But like, again, this is not to say that it was always perfect. Once again, like this didn't make it into the paper because it, just didn't quite fit. But it goes to the discussion we had about when things are like fragile connections and the social doesn't always work out. A thing that someone noticed was that their particular work never got a beta. Other people would get betas. Other people got responses when they asked for a beta, but they never did, even when they posted it in the server. And they were thinking, why is this? And one of their theories is that the work that they were writing was just not to anyone's taste. And to a certain extent, that makes sense. Like, if you're a beta, you don't want to read a whole fic as something that you really don't like to read. Because it's not a job. It's you helping someone out.
Yeah. And
so to a certain extent, there's this, people felt so much safer in this particular Discord server than they had in others. But then there's still this element of like, well, what you write does have an effect on the social environment that you're in. And should it? That's, probably not for me to say, but it did make me sad that.
Oh gosh, Casey and I could go. Casey and I could go on another tangent, maybe with you another time, about something where I think we talk about a lot is knowing when to leave a space. like in the broader sense, like if it's like, you know, how much of it is you expect, and I think this goes like in line with a lot of like other stuff that we've talked about, like the expectation of somebody who enters, you know, an area, and like knowing when it's just maybe not the right fit for you, you know, kind of a situation.
Yeah.
And instead of making yourself feel that you're outside of it, it's just trying to figure out where is that space that you feel accepted in
Right.
better, you know. And I think that takes a lot of, depending, you know, again, all the factors that break people down, like, you know, if you Venn diagram or like offshoot and all the nodes and everything, like that can be very, very nichey and harder to find, especially in like a bigger, just like anything else, you know, a bigger group, you know, there's always going to be like outliers, I think. And that's really, really difficult.
And
It is.
again, with this source material, it's so vast that I do think there are people that struggle if their sort of interests are not in the main interest, you know, if they want to explore things that are maybe a little bit more niche, and it can be a struggle to go, okay, well where do I fit? And that's really difficult. And
you can't compare apples to oranges, and like a lot of people constantly do that, you know. It's just, but you can't, because there's so many, it's just different. Like even in this situation, in this space, there's so many different varieties of work and interest. I'm
a huge proponent of if you can't find it, make it. You know, that's why I write, because I know what I want, and you know, that's not to say there's not out there, but there's not enough of it, so I make more. And I had the same thought when you were talking about what led you to this research, Nicole. You were like, well, no one's really doing this, so I'm gonna. Fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
You couldn't find it, so you made it. I love that. And
there's no directory for Discord servers. You know, I mean, there's stuff that's already public, but if you're in a private Discord server, like the Lagoon was, it's not like you can just set Google list of Discord servers with my incredibly niche interest.
Blank,
because that doesn't work. And so it's hard to find your niche. And so at that point, like you said, Casey, it's like you might need to just make it.
You absolutely might, but then also that I feel like that's probably pretty isolating.
Yeah,
because then you're kind of you know, at what point are you either being ostracized or self-ostracizing from the wider community just because you don't subscribe to the top 3 big ships or pairings or you know, tropes, whatever. That's difficult. It is difficult.
Yeah, but one thing that I think led like the people I talked to still find lots of value in the Lagoon was that there was a kind of niceness to everyone. Like even if you know, people get a little like heart reaction to the link to their posted fic, or you know, there'd be these set times where people get together and chit chat in the server. So that's kind of also where I'm thinking that the social element for the people who utilize it is just as important as like brainstorming or finding someone who you can do like these crazy idea bouncing sessions with. Like just having people in your corner,
100%.
I think is incredibly important for people, especially if they are not sharing this with people in their offline lives.
Because you don't have that outlet and you need to find it somewhere. So it's nice to have people that you could talk about that with. Yeah, absolutely.
I've got to say, thinking about that, when a little while ago we were talking about collective cognition, and it's not groupthink, it's not hive mind. Nobody could accuse the supernatural fandom of being a hive mind. We can't agree on the same fucking show. We can't agree on. Oh my lord, we won't get into it, but nobody could accuse us of being a hive mind for sure. Jeez Louise, we can't agree on what fucking shirt the boys look best in. Never mind anything else.
Yeah. Well, no, Casey and I talk about it too.
Red.
How much they found, you know, that people, you watch the same show, people get totally different. You get something different out of it, and everybody's different that way. And we're all coming from the same, singing from the same hymn sheet, coming from the same source material. And that's my favorite thing about talking to authors and artists and everyone else that we talk to,
is that we all watched the same show and we've all come away with something a little bit different, and I fucking love that. I love that.
Yeah,
I fall more in love with the characters just based on hearing people talk about them, hearing other people's love of them makes me fall more in love with them. I just love it. I'm gonna be stuck here forever. I'm not stuck. I'm not stuck.
And I think that speaks a lot to, I guess, this idea of like collective cognition as well. Like seeing other people's passion and having it affect your own relationship with the material, or having all of these conflicting interpretations colliding online, and seeing all these different versions of the characters. I think that's part of the energy of fandom, and that's an energy that is like every person's contributions do a little something.
Yeah.
And if enough people are engaged, then it kind of like builds into something bigger. And that's where I think like a lot of lurkers or the serial likers, that's a good role actually, because that's the circulation mechanism. That's the peer review and approval. And so I think that there's a lot of that, everyone's watching the same thing, but we're all different people. And so it's only through a bunch of different people getting together that something like a fandom is even possible.
It's 2 hours, so I'm going to try to just get a couple more questions in. As you could tell, we could just keep going.
That's my fault. Sorry.
No. That's what I know. It's a good topic. When we can get Casey chit chatting about something going off, then I know I know we've done well.
It's me.
Just a little bit about like, because Casey was talking about like asks like from readers and stuff, and I know you focused on this in your paper where a writer got a fic request from a reader. And I was just interested if you could just like briefly talk about like the collaborative aspect that you found like happening. And then to me, like, again, as a writer, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but like, how do you view the authorship in a situation like that? Like, is it shared? Does it get passed on at one point? Like,
Sandra, I feel like this question is going to upset my worldview, but carry on.
Okay. Yeah. But so Nicole, if you could talk a little bit about like that part of it.
I don't want to make it contentious. Like, but I think the question of authorship is sometimes kind of touchy because fan fiction has been so marginalized based on that.
Yeah.
Because when at the end of the day, people will say, okay, but they're not your characters. Just make your own characters. And so I think there's already this kind of, no, I am an author. I am creative. I'm doing something. This is my work.
Right.
Which I think is 100% correct.
Yeah.
Like, the person who writes the fan fiction, the person who is typing the words and is, getting a little burst of inspiration along the way, or, meticulously like outlining it. Oh my gosh, all that labor, that's authorship. That work is authorship. I do think it's an interesting question when you add in early inspiration and brainstorming. Let's say with a, either like a prompt that you see as part of like, let's say like a kink meme or an exchange or a secret Santa, or a request that you might have a back and forth with with the requester, or like a commission situation too. Like if we're adding commissions. So I do think there's a certain level that I find really interesting where in this case that I touched on in my dissertation, it wasn't just this like anonymous person sending a thick idea and then that just being written. It was a person who was functionally an internet stranger. If I remember correctly, they had been a reader on some previous fics that this author had put out. But they messaged them instead of like having like an anonymous ask,
right?
And gave their idea and said, "Hey, could you please write this?" The author said, in our interview about the subject, that they immediately liked the idea and started having all of these other ideas based on like the short couple of sentences. And then, so they like messaged back saying, "Oh, were you thinking like this, and this, and this?" And the person was like, oh, well, maybe this instead, or, oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that sounds great. And this maybe they like, so there's a little bit of back and forth there. And then at a certain point, the conversation ends
Mm-hmm.
and the conversation gets adapted into, notes in a notebook or notes
Mm-hmm.
on a Google Doc. And then those notes get rewritten and edited and formed into what's eventually posted, which is a
Mm-hmm.
fan fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So I think because there's like no clear boundary of when the ideas stopped influencing each other,
Mm-hmm.
there is the end of the conversation, which could be one version of when the collaboration ended.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can see like the finished product is still in dialogue with the original request,
Mm-hmm.
which I think I kind of lean towards.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of authorship, I mean, I do think it wouldn't be a full co-author situation because
Right.
obviously one person wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's that kind of like, oh, it's kind of
Like
slippery.
inspired
Just a little bit.
by, or like story, like when you see on a like an episode of Supernatural, like sometimes you won't just see written by, you'll see story by, and then you'll see teleplay by, kind of a situation. So you can see there's a collaborative part of it, but then there is an end result that ends up being this piece, this script that then the show was, built around and directed and all those things. So yeah, it's just, that's what makes it so, it makes it just interesting. Like how many different parts of fanfic, kind of have to be in place, can be in place, don't always have to be. And then how much they're along for the journey for it. And then it's just like, when does it stop and when does it continue on?
Mm-hmm.
I did
too. The person who requested was saying basically that they saw like a gap in the reader insert canon. They were like, okay, I would like to read a fic like this and I can't find it.
Interesting.
So that's also them in dialogue with the genre and with other fan fiction writers. So it's not just these two people messaging back and forth in like the Tumblr direct messages.
Yeah.
There are also larger conversations and collaborations happening, even if they're more abstract. So I think in that sense, calling it actual shared authorship is maybe a step too far. But I think that's why maybe I wanted to gesture more towards this like ecosystem of thought, rather than direct lineages. Although, TV is a great example too of collaborative writing, thinking of writers' rooms and showrunners versus Supernatural is a weird case there because I think a lot of episodes were written in pretty much isolation. But thinking about, shows like Game of Thrones or Rings of Power, where not only have a writer's room, you also have like all sorts of decision committees and execs and producers who are also collaborating, even if it's kind of contentious and there's power imbalances.
I want to ask this one question because this is a question that I particularly thought of Casey for, because we have discussions about this all the time. And I was like, if you got any interesting insights in like any of your one-on-one interviews too, but like, how much agency do you feel some writers think they have when it comes to writing a story about a well-known character? Like, Casey knows where I'm going with this. When do they feel like they are the scribe, or do they really feel like they have some?
Right now I'm called. Yep.
Or do they feel like they like they're almost being like, not possessed isn't the right word, but like inhabited by like, this is what I want you to write, or this is what I want to write, kind of a situation.
Yeah.
Like, did you get any sort of insights from your interviews and stuff on that?
Yes. That was another thing that I explicitly asked people because I'm also really interested in that. And well, kind of like the question about if people, write in isolation or they like to share and do collaborative steps at every step of the process. It varied so widely. There were some people who they're like, no, if a character is surprising me when I write them, that is my own creativity and like surprising me like myself. And so everything was framed through their own agency as the writer. Even if they weren't people who like outlined every step. There were some authors who I talked to who were like, I know it's all me. But then on the opposite side of it, I spoke to several people who were like, it's like I'm watching a movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just happening. And I am the scribe, like you said. I think that's the right word for it. Like they were like, I'm just like the stenographer of what's going on, watching the scene. And that is what is coming out of me.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like being like almost inhabited by the characters, I did see that less. I didn't hear so many people say it in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of movies. And then I know from other research I've done with like other Discord servers and like the lead up to this big dissertation, that there are people who do feel like that, especially if they pin a character or do role play as that character. Those are like slightly different processes, and there's a lot of overlap, fan fiction and role play.
Yeah.
But I heard that more with them. So I do think there's a really wide range of how people engage with their own fictions. One thing that I do think was kind of interesting, and this is, I think, still on the topic, is how people imagined their audiences, especially as they wrote reader inserts. A lot of discussion was around writing with your reader specifically in mind, what they'll find immersive, what they'll imagine at different points, and trying to write to induce these kind of like immersive states in the reader, which I think is a kind of version of this, right? Where you're writing with a character in mind. In this case, the character is your imagined future reader.
Yeah.
So I think there is a lot of like back and forth of agency. And like you said, like these are characters that are strictly bound by canon. Even if you're doing AUs, a lot of people are worried about being in character.
Yeah, it's a
whatever
big
it
thing.
means for any given thing, any given writer.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, there is a lot of agency that the character has over the writing process because they are the boundaries. Those are like the bumper rails when you're bowling.
Yeah.
There's only so far you can go before it stops being a story about pass. And it stops being recognizable to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope that answered it. Like I say, there's not a lot of like cohesion with the answers that people gave. So
no, that's
really a collection of examples.
That's what I love about it, because Casey talks about this a lot too, that they feel like they are kind of just the scribe, and like if somebody's not behaving, they need to fucking get in line and figure out what the hell their problem is, that they can continue writing, and I think that's where you get into the whole believability in character. Like and I think this is where maybe Casey's a little self-deprecating with their writing skills, and they need to believe in themselves more, that they know something's not gelling. They just have to get to the point of what makes sense for this character. And I don't think that's necessarily them being the scribe. That's just them honing their writing skills.
I never feel like I'm driving the car. I can have an idea, and that idea is usually, hey, what if this happened? And I start the car and we'll set off, and very, very quickly, I am not driving the car. I am just writing. I'm just writing what's happening. Like, do you know how many of my plots have actually finished as I plotted them out? Literally none. Literally none. But it's not like watching a movie. Like, if it was watching a movie, I think that probably would be easier, because I could just be like, and this, and this, and this. It's like herding cats is the only fucking way I can describe it. I have a basket of kittens, and I would like the basket of kittens to walk from point A to point B, and I have a fairly good idea of how we're going to get there. And so I let the basket of kittens out, and they go, and now we flee. And now I'm left going, wait,
come back. What are you doing?
What? And then it's just me constructing an ever more elaborate, like, series of roadblocks to guide them back to where I want them to go. If it was a movie, that'd be fucking sweet. I could just be like, I'm in this, and this, and this.
Yeah.
Nice. But it's never. but it's equally, I never feel like I'm in control and I'm driving the story forward. I'm literally just along for the ride. And like, I write reader insert and I write Wincest. So like, and this applies to my reader insert characters as well. Sometimes I'll think that I know what we're doing because I'm like, this is me. This is a representation of me. I know who this person is. And then they go, woo. And I'm like, wait, fuck, just get back here. What just happened?
They have a mind of their own.
Yeah.
Literally, yeah. Literally, that is how it feels.
Because that's an interesting thing with like, I think there needs to be more attention, I think, in fan studies about this like mind of their own element. Because it didn't come so across in my interviews, but I only interviewed like 26 people. How big is fandom? Bigger than 26 people. Well, it was too much for me personally, but let's say, I was trying to do like a survey of like, authors' views of their characters' agencies. 26 is nothing. So I do think that anthropology does an actual pretty good job. Let's connect it to anthropology, actually. Anthropology has a lot of literature around dreams and magic and witchcraft, not in the like hocus pocus sense, but in the sense of how people actually do it, which is quite different across cultures. But one thing that has come across a little bit in this like broad field of dreams and magic is the importance and reality of fiction. Even if it's completely considered like fiction or metaphorical within the cultural context, there's still so much power and reality placed on visions. I was just reading this one book. It's by Eduardo Cohn. It's called How Fourths Think. It was really important for my dissertation. And he describes how important dreams are to this group of people in the Amazon. And dreams are considered to be like premonitions in some representative way of what's coming. Like if a dog is going to die, the dog is assumed to be supposed to tell their owner if they're going to die in the dream before it happens.
All right.
Not in so much of a way of like you literally see what's going to happen, but there's some representational way that the dog has agency as this fictional and real thing all at once.
Yeah.
And so I think here's a free idea for any anthropologist out there. I think there's a really cool piece of research that needs to be written about the agency of fictional characters as both something real and imaginary and collective, and how they have power over, the fan fictions that they appear in, or the way that like people construct fanon of them in fandom spaces. Because it's there's something there. There's some power that these collective constructs have. What does Dean Winchester mean, and how is he running the show in like the whatever fan fiction he's in?
I couldn't even begin to try and verbalize that. He just is. And I will say, as someone who has written both Sam and Dean, he's a fucking bitch to write. He's an absolute pain in my ass to write because he sulks. The Dean Winchester that lives in my head, that exists in my work, he sulks. And he will throw a tantrum and throw all his fucking teddies out of the car and then piss off. And then I'm left standing there going, we had a plan. What the fuck have you done?
It's interesting because like we've had conversations where I find Sam harder to write. And, just because I don't feel like I know him well enough. You know what I find interesting?
No, it's because Sam. No. It's because Sam will just stand there and go, no. But you could work with that. Because he's standing there and he's 6'4" and he's a fucking moose, but he's still standing in front of you and he might be going, no. But you have something tangible to work with. Dean gets in the car and fucks off, and you're left with a big gaping hole in the story going, Please come back. You're on the phone then begging, like, no, baby, please. We can do it how you want to do it. Don't worry about it. I promise I won't do that. Nobody's going to fuck up the car. Just please come back. Let's talk about this. It's totally different characterizations.
I feel
Nicole's frantically writing notes for the next
I don't know. Just honestly, like one of the things and I don't know if you found this at all, and I don't know how much like diving into supernatural fandom fan fiction you got into at all part of this, but I was just amazed at how many works are written about Dean Winchester in every possible scenario, situation, tagging, and everything like that. And I don't know if there's something in particular about certain characters that lend themselves to people just like feeling this, I can play with this character and I can go all these different ways with this character, and they almost feel kinship. I don't know. It's just, but it seems so interesting how some people take a character and come up with so many different variables and variations. And I don't know if it's just because of supernatural in general and the, sort of like the fantasy sci-fi aspect of it, but I just find it interesting because there's a lot of fiction written about this man. I mean, like in papers about like fiction, like they note him, in a big part of it. And I don't know if you like came across anything like that or found anything interesting about. Since you are a Dean girl, I thought maybe you might have like checked in there a little bit. Yeah, and I'm just
with my moose.
Just a little bit, Casey. I'm just curious. I'm just curious if it's
sit
just
on
me.
his antlers, and we're gonna bitch about the pair of you.
Yeah. But did you do any? And if you didn't, I totally understand. But like, did you get curious after, like, or before you really like figured out what you're gonna do? Like, did you notice anything?
Yeah. So in terms of what I did in this project, this is one thing I think is a weakness in my dissertation is I don't focus that much on the actual characters.
Mm-hmm.
I was really honed in on like the writing process, but it's like you guys are in my head because I'm literally writing research proposals right now about connecting kinship to fictional characters and like fandom communities, because I think you're bang on the money for something's happening here. Like we talked about knowing the characters, the Dean that's in your head, Casey, or like you, Sandra, not knowing Sam well enough to write him well.
Yeah.
There's a personal relationship we're having, but like everyone's having a personal relationship with these characters. The writers of the show and the actor famously has a personal relationship.
Yeah.
And is it because there's so much shared authorship? Like none of the writers own Dean or Sam or any of them.
Jensen
None of the Jensen has it on
Jensen
lock.
owns him. Yep.
Yeah, it's a thing where like everyone has no one has a piece that they own even. It's like this is like a tulpa. It's like a tulpa.
That's what I was thinking today. I was thinking this morning how much it is like that. And I was like, I wanted to mention that too, that it's like almost like the collective cognition in a way just becomes like, certain groups can like, I feel like we tulpa, certain things about this character collectively. That's immediately what I was thinking of this morning before. I was like, it is like a tulpa. It's just crazy.
That's why I specified the Dean and Sam that live in my head. Because the only people, like, if we're talking about an answer versus the answer, that is my an answer. But Sam and Dean live with Jared and Jensen. And that is, if they say something about the character, whether I agree with it or not, that is the final word on it. And that's, and I know that causes a lot of discord. And like, obviously that goes for other characters, like Misha owns Cass and, like, Jim Beaver owns Bobby, like that's unanimous. But whether I agree with what they say or don't, that is the final word. And maybe my Sam and Dean get in line with that, and maybe they don't, and that's fine. But the Sam and Dean from the show is owned by them, and we're all just, it's our interpretation of it, it's our version of it, like a tulpa.
I think I don't know. I almost want to push back a little bit and say, because
please do.
Chrissy and Kripke and Dab and Barons all have completely different versions of Sam and Dean.
Mm.
And then the actor's job is to like synthesize these in some ways, reject some, or then there's some continuity shenanigans with having so many writers with so much turnover.
Yeah.
There's so many cooks in the kitchen, so many ladles in the pot, that I think questions of like definitive, this is the character interpretation, is almost like the cat's out of the bag, which is where I think like the fandom also has a role in determining.
Yeah.
I almost think that there's no real Sam and Dean in terms of canon, in terms of like final word. Obviously, I do realize that Sam and Dean are fictional characters, and there is
We have to remind ourselves of that.
Well, I mean,
real Sam and Dean.
Yeah.
The show has been going for like the show has existed for almost 25 years, and yet we're still here talking about it.
Well,
There's
because
something there, yeah.
Because I think too,
there's something there. There is, in a very real way, a tulpa here, in that so many people live it and believe in it and exist within it, that it exists. It's a thing.
I think too, it's just that, if you talk about Jensen and Jared, they've been the through line through all of the different people that have been a part of creating, but I think, yes, Kripke is a big part of it because he's the one that came up with, the idea and the story. And then you've got all the different producers, all the different writers that do have it is interesting if you like dip into different times and different writers. It's like you pull out different things in those episodes that you wouldn't pull out in another writer. But then I think as you guys were talking about it too, like once the show was over, the tulpa aspect I think grew even greater because then you've got the fandom
now that ours for real
taking care of it and continuing it. But then you do get back to every once in a while, like at a convention or talking about, I think Jared and Jensen are the physical vessels of, us for Sam and Dean. And I always say, like, when I go to a convention, for me, it's like getting to touch Jensen is getting close to the person that's the closest to him and cares about Dean and knows Dean probably, I think, better than anybody else because he was able to bring him to us sort of in a way. And again, it's like tulpa, but it's like this, it's so bizarre and crazy.
I think that's what drives my sort of stance on that. Is that no matter how much I love Sam Winchester and I love him to death, he is literally like my soul character. Jared loves him more. And that's there's nobody on earth that loves and cherishes these boys more than they do. And as you're right that writers have changed and production teams have changed and showrunners have changed and things like that. But when you get into the later seasons and the new guys coming in defer to Jared and Jensen, would Sam do this?
There's all sorts of stories,
Would Dean do that? And they've gone up to bat and they've rejected ideas and they've said no, it wouldn't happen like that. And I know that there's still controversy around it, but Jensen had to be talked into the ending. Jensen had to call Kripke, who had not been involved for 10 years, and go, I don't understand. Like, what? He had to be talked into that. That's Dean's his in my mind. And I still don't speak for anybody other than me, but Dean's his in my mind. Sam's Jared's, and they just exist as they're just the ones that live in my head that refuse to do as they're fucking told. They're my versions of them.
Nicole, you've got so many ideas now.
I swear to God, she's filled out like 2 sides of A4.
I think we've made it worse for you, and we apologize, but
this is fantastic, though.
Can I proffer a different idea, though?
Yeah, what's up?
Sorry. I would really, really love to see if you get this kind of fanaticism in another fandom. If this is exclusive to Supernatural. Because fandom exists everywhere. There's fandom for almost everything, but we are known for this. The fandom is like, even even if someone's never seen the TV show, they know Supernatural. They know the fandom. We're the fandom that has a gift for everything. We show up everywhere. The fandom is much bigger than the source material at this point, I would say. And I would really love to know if this kind of fanaticism exists, or if other fandoms are just a little bit more normal on main.
That is an interesting one, especially because, like you said, Sandra, it's a question too of why certain characters get so much written about them. Like you said, Casey, it's like, where's the feral energy from everyone else? I think I do see a lot of it. Just in like trying to find different servers to join. And that's the question. That's the question being, I think, that'll come out in future research. What is going on with Supernatural?
That's going to be so much. That's going to be so much PhD research. What is going on with the Supernatural?
That's going to be the title. That's the title of this. Yeah, that's going to be the title of the podcast.
Is that what you're going to call this episode? What's going on with the Supernatural fandom?
No, just what's going on with Supernatural. I just think it's great because it really just
with the Kardashians.
Yeah. But I don't think for a second that other fandoms out there aren't as feral as we are about stuff. I don't think we exist in a vacuum. But also, I'm kind of like, do they hide it? Like, where are they hiding it? Because we're fucking crazy on main. What is happening right now? Where are they putting all this? Like, because I don't.
Well, I don't know if this is maybe going to be a little off topic. Way to go out. But have you guys been seeing this about the 911 firefighters show? There is a ship war happening right now that I am witness to. And there are people like they're posting fics on AO3 that are like untagged harassment fics.
Oh, wow.
People are sending death threats to each other. There's like crazy stuff happening in the 911 fandom right now. I think Supernatural has a lot of flame
wars. We start it?
I think we might have started it,
Pandora's box has been opened. But in terms of like the feral energy, it's out there. There somewhere.
Wow.
Like, I'm gonna. Voltron started the pro shippers and anti shippers thing. Like that was Voltron, in like 2016. So like there's the evil is found elsewhere as well.
No, I'm gonna claim that because like it's been 4 years since the show ended. A bunch of those fans have had to go find something else to hyperfixate on. So they've just fucked off and brought the feral energy somewhere else. I need to know, Nicole, these ship wars, are they het ships or gay ships?
They are gay.
Brilliant. I need to look them up because my husband watches 911 and he will be really fucking upset. He will be very upset.
Not like, amazing. Yes, it's Buck Tommy and Buddy. Those are the two ships. Have fun.
It's not that he will have an opinion on the ship. He will just be upset that people are arguing about this because he's like, ew, no. Like to put it in context, he's not homophobic or anything. He just doesn't see it. He's just like a straight white dude. He doesn't see it.
Yeah.
So when we watched 1518 with Cass's declaration of love, but we finished the episode and I turned to my husband and I went, I think that was romantic. And my husband deadass sat there and watched that speech that Misha Collins went, nah, they're just friends.
They're just friends.
My love, please.
That's what my mom did. My mom also is a casual watcher, and so we have some fun conversations sometimes. Her favorite character is, I'd say Dean, but she says it's Cass. And she watched the episode, and I'll say, like, as someone who is more on the Destiel side of the fandom, I was like standing, like I was watching a close football game. When I was watching the episode, I was like out of my mind. I was freaking out. And then I talked to her later and she's like, I don't know why he had that long speech before he died. And I'm like, Mom, what are you talking about? And I was like, I tried to explain the confession. And she's like, I don't know. I think they're friends.
So interesting.
So,
yeah.
It's the heterosexual goggles. They're very strong. Just like that goggles are strong, you know?
Yeah. And that is unfortunately, that is where the actors own the characters falls down a little bit because you've literally got diametrically opposed Jensen going, Destiel does not exist. and Misha going, dude, if CW weren't so homophobic, they would be balls deep every episode, and I can't reconcile that, unfortunately.
Yeah, we have well, that's the thing with like multiple sources or like collaborative storytelling, because thinking about, let's say you're in a D&D game, the things that your friends' characters do affect what your character does, and it's through the mismatch of everything that the story comes. I think with the acting, it's similar, where like you have like two potentially conflicting visions of what the story means, and what do you do with that? I think we have to sit with it. You know, I think we have to go. There's no truth. There's no one true thing, because like there's so many cooks in that kitchen.
Yeah, and
some of them have disagreements about very fundamental things.
Yeah, and I'm like, I totally ascribe to ship and let ship. You know, I personally, I didn't see that. I could see that it was a declaration of love, 100%, and romantic love at that. But I didn't see reciprocation from Dean, so I don't see the Destiel.
Yeah, that's a big contentious thing.
Yeah, but I'm not.
These interpretations major.
Yeah, but I'm not going to go on Tumblr and start bashing people. I'm going to be like, you see what you see, and that's cool, and I see what I see, and that's cool, and we don't have to argue about it. I'm not like, there's no one true answer.
Right. And I do think this is where I think here's my personal take on it. And once again, maybe this gets cut or doesn't. But
Sandra's written down about 4 timestamps for cases going off on one, and again, and again, and again. Yeah.
But I think where I come with it is, I think it was probably supposed to be ambiguous. I think that they had to thread the needle for different audiences.
Yeah.
And also they had to thread the needle with the different desires of the actors, potentially. We're not backstage. We only know what they say. But I think that it was on purpose ambiguous, which means that all of this fighting about canon reciprocation or not canon reciprocation is kind of besides the point to me. Because if it's open for interpretation, I think that is the canon statement. The canon statement is open for interpretation. That means we can all go about our merry way and have fun and be nice to each other.
That's brilliant.
We can help.
I have like another 4 research ideas for you, which center around LGBTQ plus representation in media and why people latch onto characters that are never explicitly stated to be LGBTQ plus, but yet people insist that they are.
Casey, we are like brain siblings right now.
You'd already written that down, hadn't you?
I have this shelved idea, which is about death of the author versus queer representation versus queer coding, and all of these discourses around, who gets to say if they're gay?
Yeah, because I think that is so much of the contention around like Destiel and sort of Destiel versus Wincest is none of the main characters were ever explicitly said to be LGBTQ plus in any capacity up until that point, but everyone had coded, well, not everyone, but a whole bunch of people had said Dean and Cass are totally gay. And then it's like, okay, but you're projecting. You want the representation and you're projecting it. Really there?
I honestly think that the question is not about representation. I think that there's something else going on here. Because in terms of what gets people really excited, it's not necessarily a gay couple on screen. People say that, but then when you look at how they treat other actual canon gay couples on screen, it's nowhere near the same levels of excitement. I think that there is something about the queer
physical
baiting
attractiveness
that is
of the
like,
actors.
well,
that might have something to do with it.
Well, think about they have 2 gay guys on 911 Lone Star. I don't see anything about them. I mean, I see some gift sets when they make out, but those guys are hotter than Jensen and Misha. I'll tell you that much.
Sandra's going to leave the Zoom calls now. There's nobody hotter than Jensen. Fucking hell.
Dean.
Yeah. When he cuts his hair again, it's over for all of those bitches. Sandra's going to take every one of them out. She's
We'll be
waiting for it
listening
every time she goes to a convention. She's like, I hope he
not the
cuts
Dean
his
hair.
hair.
I say I need the Dean hair. Yeah, no. But that is interesting though.
That's interesting though. It's definitely something about Dean and Cass, or Jared and Jensen and Misha then.
Or
not just
like
two
to
aliens.
like I think so. I think it's one, obviously people are connected to the characters that they're connected with. To go back to our Tolpo discussion, those characters have attracted people who not only see themselves in that character, but also have a personal relationship with that character. So they obviously they care more about the romantic and emotional reality of those characters versus like Charlie's latest girlfriend, for instance. Like there's no Dorothy, Charlie, rabid shippers. And so I really do think it's not about representation per se, because people often like to do this thing where they give a more sound reason, a more straightforward reason for something than is true to the messy reality. I don't know. I think thinking about things like Sherlock, thinking about things like all these other like great American queer baits. I think it's part of, maybe I can tie it back to the collective cognition. It's like an energy that people create this theory or create this interpretation, and there's this explosion of creative energy where there's fan fictions and fan art and all this stuff, and it becomes a thing of its own rather than being like a concerted political effort for more bisexual rep.
But also then like how the fandom influences the initial work, because like from stuff we've heard and we know, like anytime, and this was early on, this was even before Cass was even in the thing, and it was really like nobody better get between Sam and Dean. If there's a female involved, they're not sticking around for a long time. So it's almost like, how much of that then, like we were talking about the authorship part of it, like, somebody has an idea, somebody has an ask, somebody has a want, how that gets fueled, and then how that changes what could have been a very different show, like if they had been allowed to have outside relationships.
Like if Joe Dean went canon. Or if Lisa Dean was more of a thing, and the actresses weren't getting hate mail. I mean, what would the show look like? Would they have stuck around? I mean, there's a reason, and thinking too of like, the writer's strike and how that famously changed the show entirely. Would Bella have been a character that they keep around? Would we have an more of an ensemble cast from the earlier seasons? And so I think the authorship, there's so much going on. And in terms of like why /fiction or /fan fiction is a big thing, once again, to everyone listening, if they're really interested in why so many people ship gay ships, Fan Studies has a lot of great stuff written about /fan fiction. Go on to Transformative Works and Cultures, which is AO3's for free academic journal, and just type in like /fic or /fanfic, and you will be inundated with all this amazing analysis of like, why is it mostly women who are into
we talked about this.
Are they mostly straight? Are the women mostly straight, or are they mostly queer? There's all sorts of interesting things going on.
I had things to do tonight. I had shit to do. When we were done here,
cancel your plans.
I had like actual real life housekeeping shit to do, and now I'm gonna get none of it done because now I'm gonna be like fucking 17 scrolls deep in that, going, who does shit? What is the demographic?
Gosh. On that note, it's been 2 hours and 45 minutes, and I was thinking we were not going to go this long. So I think we need to.
I do have to get to dinner, probably.
Yes. I was saying we got to let you go, but
I have a question first.
Okay. I have a quick question.
I have a question first.
Okay.
And I like to think that this is going to leave your brain puzzling for quite some time, Nicole. This is absolutely nothing to do with your dissertation or supernatural or fandom or anthropology or anything else. And you haven't listened to any episodes, so this is still a fucking surprise.
Oh no.
What is your favorite dinosaur?
This is a great
Yes.
question. This is a great question.
Yes. Do you know how long
when
it's
I
been
was a
since I've got a
child-
silence? Because now people have listened. I've asked enough people that people listen and they go, I've planned my dinosaur answer. And I'm like, that's really nice and I'm really happy. But also, I like the what? Silence. Sorry, carry on. Nicole, go.
Good. When I was a child, it was a stegosaurus. I thought they were the best. I was
Amazing.
really into paleontology as a kid.
Yes.
I had a dinosaur book. This was my thing.
Yes.
Stegosaurus when I was a child, but then I found out that they were really stupid. They had really small brains, and I felt like they couldn't be my favorite anymore. So now I'd probably say
Humans
I
will
don't know if
pack
you guys
bond
have...
with anything. I'm now sad for all the Stegosauruses you rejected.
No, I'm sure they're fine. They won't even remember that I said that in 2 minutes.
I don't want to put too fine a point on it, Nicole, but they're definitely not fine, babes. They're all dead, all of them. They're not fine.
Oh gosh.
Oh, share this with me. Yes. Okay. So I think now probably velociraptors, but not the Jurassic Park ones, the ones that are like in that new Apple documentary with David Attenborough, where they like animate them with cute little feathers.
With the feathers, the real ones.
And then them hunting in packs, and they're very cute. And I love them. So probably velociraptors.
Velociraptors. You make it on the table. You do. I have a dinosaur. I have a dino doc because I ask everybody that question now, and I'm keeping track. And I've got tallies of like the favorite dinosaurs, and one of the top ones isn't even a fucking animal, but we won't get into that.
Oh,
Sandra's like, the fuck? No, we won't. I will mute you. Shut up. Thank you for indulging me, Nicole.
yes,
That was fun. Thank you.
Nicole, thank you so much. I was going to ask if you had any like thoughts just to end the discussion before we let you go so you can go eat and do all the things you need to do. Like just overall thoughts about the research and just in general after this process, like what were you left with? Instead of just more research.
Yeah.
So many more questions, guys. So many.
I mean, obviously, like my first thought is I gotta do 10 more of these.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because it's such an interesting topic. In terms of besides that, I think the thing I'm left with is just how generous people were.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned, it's a weird thing to ask, but everyone from the very beginning up to the very end was just so enthusiastic about my project. They wanted my project to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very generous with their time. Everyone I interviewed, scheduling, time zones, going over time because I couldn't stop asking questions, and people had so many long, wonderful answers to give. People were incredibly generous, and in talking with other people from my class who were also doing research at the same time as me, I had by far the most enthusiastic response from my participants.
That's wonderful.
People were my classmates were like in shock and awe that everyone was so ready to help me with this. That's so I think my final thought is just, I love you guys.
Oh,
it was great.
So
it was
nice.
a great experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that says a lot for the fandom, you know, and in general, like, you know, we talk a good game, but I think, you know, there's always wanting to, you know, embrace and, you know, bring people in, you know, to the fold and like, yeah, you know, it's safe here. Come on in, have some fun, you know.
We're good people. We got gifts and cookies. Cookies.
Yeah. I am going to let you go, but I want to say thank you again. You spent a lot of time with us and really do appreciate it.
Just before you leave, thank you so much for coming to talk to us. I now have 1,001 questions that I didn't have before we started this. And I appreciate that you're probably very fucking busy now because you've got like 3 A4 pages of like, I could research this and this and this. But open invite if you want to come back and talk about supernatural, anything like that. If you want to come back like as a fan, as a reader, we would love to have you back just to chat about your experience, not from this perspective, just from a fan experience.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be so fun. Yeah, I had a fantastic time chatting with you guys today.
Yay.
So I think that would be really fun to come back. And yeah, thank you guys too. I'm excited to talk about my research. It was fun to get this opportunity. And so thank you guys for being generous and reading the thing. I'm just excited people read it.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And I mean, like I said, we could have asked a ton more questions, but we will let you go.
Yes. So, if you're on UK time, it's dinner time.
It's dinner time. All right. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Super fun.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Blast. Bye. Have a good evening.
Goodbye.
That was really good. Nice. There were so many questions.
Sandra, I could never fucking do that. I have so many fucking questions right now. I'm like, wait, no, I have follow-up questions on my follow-up questions. Fuck. Oh my God, that's the best.
That was really good. I really did like where the conversation took us. There was a lot of interesting topics and discussion. And
I would love for Nicole to come back and talk to us just as a fan.
Yeah.
You know, just as a reader, as a fan, how'd you get into Supernatural? Yada, yada, yada. You know, that would be fucking sweet.
Absolutely. I'm excited for people to hear the conversation and see what people have to say about it. But we should wrap up because, yes, editing Sandra is thinking, oh my God, 3 hours.
Editing Sandra is cursing my bloodline right now. That's what's happening. Editing Sandra is mumbling furiously to herself, and I'm just making it worse. Any sort of closing thoughts about about just chatting and stuff?
I just really loved hearing how it works for people, you know, in a server, the collaborative aspect of it, like even being a part of it, but seeing it from somebody's sort of like outsider observance, it is interesting. And
I think
then
when you live it like we do, because our server obviously is not as big as the Lagoon, but we still have, there's still collaboration, there's still support, we still champion people writing and stuff, and we still, we'll get together and we'll collaborate on writing, and we hold sprints and things like that. But I think when you live it and you experience it, either in our server or in the Lagoon or anywhere else, I think it's very different than getting the perspective of somebody who is coming externally and just kind of sitting and looking and being like, oh my God, this is so fucking interesting.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
So I'm glad we did this, because I was just like, yes, please, because I was just so interested after
I had a blast
being a part of, I think I was a part of like the reader insert discussion, and then even just the interview with Nicole just made me just so interested in what her findings were going to be. So
I have follow-up thoughts.
Okay.
I asked you because that is the societally accepted thing to do when I want to talk about me for a minute.
Okay.
That's how that goes, isn't it? I go, what do you think? And then you tell me what you think, and then I get to go, and I think.
But I thought you did. Didn't you just do that? Or didn't you just do that, or am I wrong?
No, that was a follow-up to what you said.
Oh, I mean about
individual thoughts.
About the interview and the stuff and different things like that? Okay, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't want to tell you now. You've made me feel weird.
Yes, you do. Tell me.
No, I really do, but you've made me feel weird about it now. No, I just, it's like, I'm aware of anthropology as like a concept, but it's like, it's very sort of distant. Yeah, no, but that is kind of what you think about is like a study of other cultures. It's very much, it to my mind, it's a study of other things that are unfamiliar to me. So to kind of be in the space and people like, what do you mean people are studying what I do? What? That's
it almost makes you think, oh, is there something interesting about, because if you live it every day, you don't see.
And that actually does tie into what you were just saying about, being in collaborative spaces and getting the experience from someone who comes in externally. There's a similar kind of vibe. It's just like, this is our day to day. This is what we do. And we watch Supernatural and we write fic about it and we just live our life. And then you're like, what do you mean you want to study it? That's really like, you know that image or that gif of the dude and he's going like, there's like fireworks going off behind his head. I'm sure you know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That is like my brain, because I'm like, what do you mean people want to study? Like, what do you mean this is like culture to be studied? That's fucking insane. I'm not culture. I'm just people.
Yeah, but you've had discussions with Dreamer too about like, what are you going to leave with your
I was thinking that. So, I was thinking that, and I'm so gutted. I'm so gutted that she can't listen to this yet. I'll get her there. I'll go. She's finished her bang. I'll fucking get her there. I'm so gutted she can't listen to this yet because I want to just point to this and go, see, we're representative. In 100 years, we're representative. What do you owe to history? The answer is nothing. She owes nothing to history. But still, she was very dismissive of me being like, but we are what if this is all that's left? What if it's us? And now I get to go, see.
Well, it's just like everything else we're talking about the fandom and like, its continuation, like the heartbeat of it. Like, when does it finally does it at some point, not become a thing anymore? I don't think that's the case. I think, again, talking about the tulpa aspect of it, I think as long as there's somebody somewhere thinking about Dean Winchester or Sam Winchester or Castiel or whatever, like it's going to continue. I think probably it will change and evolve. And there will be fan works of fan works as we get further down the line. That's
because
so crazy. There's
no canon. There's nothing new coming out of canon, is there? It's something Mark Shepard said when I saw the Supernatural panel at Liverpool, that the stories that Supernatural tells are as relevant today in 2024 as they were 5, 10, 15 years ago. The story's relevancy doesn't change. And I think that's going to continue, is that the relationships and the stories and the lessons
absolutely
are never going to diminish. I think it will change over time, but I don't think it will ever be truly gone. That's a lovely note to end on, isn't it?
It is.
Masterful.
So please, for the love of everything that is editing Sandra, let's wrap up this baby.
Shut up! Fucking hell! Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up, but we want to thank Nicole and thank you for listening and let us know what you thought of the episode. I think there's going to be lots of thoughts. Email us at idlingintheimpala@gmail.com. Comment on Spotify in the Q&A section. Leave a YouTube comment. Join our Discord and chat with fellow idlers and us in real time. Check out our merch store, which is another fun way to show your support. You can find details for everything on our website. That's idlingintheimpala.com. Want to fuel our supernatural road trip? Consider joining us on Ko-fi. For as little as $1 a month, we have perks to go along with different membership tiers, and would love to have you along for the ride.
Don't forget, though, you can always support us for free by liking, commenting, subscribing on YouTube, and following, rating, sharing on audio platforms. Engagement like that really helps us with the algorithms. All hail their benevolence. As always, we have the causes that we support in the description. So from me, you have LGBTQ plus talking charities. From Sandra, you have mental health charities. And the main causes that we are championing, highlighting, spotlighting are World Central Kitchen and Doctors Without Borders. If you want to know more about these causes, why we're supporting them, what they mean to us, check out idlingintheimpala.com. There is a page there called Causes Cause with all the details. So with that, we will say thank you so much to Nicole for joining us and talking to us and going through her research and everything else. That was endlessly cool, and I have so many questions to look up now. Thank you for joining us in the backseat, and we will see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.